She noticed, pulling her own cheeks until her face formed a smile. It was such a forced smile that it hurt to look at. I'm sure there's a reason for why that happened. Especially because he wants to ask her something, and unlike the two of us, there's still an aberration remaining in her left arm.
Suppose there is.
The monkey's paw.
So could that mean it's not Kambari he needs, but her left arm?
Titi's just a guess, of course. I doubted it was that simple, but broadly speaking, it seemed likely.
So if it's Kambaru's fighting abilities he's after does, that mean even more fight scenes down the line?
TT's hard to say. But as far as combat, Araragi has Shinobu now, so I doubt he's necessarily looking for more people to help him in a fight. All of this was based on conjecture. Miss Senjogahara and I didn't know what kind of situation Araragi was in. We could talk all day and never arrive at a conclusion.
So, Miss Hanekawa, what are you going to do?
What am I going to do?
Are you going to their meeting spot, or are you not? Whatever the situation, you'd be able to meet him there, yes?
I considered it, but I don't think I will. I feel like I'd only get in his way if I did.
Oh, then I won't go either.
Really? I'd assumed she'd insist on going and was ready for a heated argument, but instead I was fooled, or maybe tripped up. I'd been wondering what I could possibly do to stop a determined Miss Senjogahara who insisted on imposing upon him.
I'll take his lack of correspondence as proof that he's doing well. It doesn't seem like he's trying to hide anything the way he did with Kambari's monkey. If anything, he's being out in the open with it. He has to know that any message he sends to Kambari is going to make its way to us.
That was true. But still. You're not going?
I'm not. I feel the same as you. I could go, but all I'd do is get in his way, and it also feels like there are other things I might be able to do.
I didn't have a clue what her suggestive addition was supposed to mean, but that's how things stood. His lack of correspondence was proof that he was doing well. A sign of trust. Yes, I was going to accept that convenient interpretation.
But it does seem like Araragi and Kambaru aren't the only ones with lingering aberrations in their bodies.
What? There's someone else? Aragi's demon and Miss Kanbar's monkey are the only aberrations around us left, aren't they?
Personally.
She responded, making for some reason what sounded like a cat pun. I wanted to press her, but just then Mr. Senjogahara brought tea and tea cakes for 3, and our whispered conversation was cut short. No, it probably would have been at that point even if he'd taken a little longer to make tea. I say this because at that moment there was a knock at the door of room 201, Tamakura Apartments. It didn't have an intercom, if you were wondering.
Oh. Looks like they're here. Here.
She said, getting up, so she must have been expecting the guests. Expected or not, I was on guard, in the dark as to who could be visiting. But when she opened the door and I saw who was standing there, I understood everything, including the nature of the scheme she'd mentioned the day before. I didn't need any explanation, and I didn't need any introduction. Outside the door were Araragi's little sisters, Karen Araragi and Tsukihi Araragi, the Fire Sisters.
There was apparently a conversation that went like so.
My goodness. Look at what we have here. If it isn't Karen, what a surprise, meeting you in a place like this.
Oh, wow, look at that. It's you, Miss Senjogahara. What a coincidence meeting you like this in front of my home.
Yes, it's almost as if I used my phone's map to figure out your exact route back from school and was waiting here to ambush you. Hehehehe.
Ha ha ha. Well, maybe some people might be stupid enough to get that mistaken impression. The world is full of idiots, after all. It's too bad there are so few clever kids like me out there. Wait, but what about school, Miss Senjogahara?
School? What's that?
I guess it's fine if you don't know.
No, I'm just kidding. Of course I know. That was just a Gahara joke. I took the day off due to somewhat unavoidable circumstances. Your middle school has half days until today, right?
Yep,
But you've got some bad timing. I'm sure you wanted to meet my brother while you just so happened to be here. But he's actually out right now. He went off somewhere as soon as the new term got started. My guess is that this is his journey of self-discovery part. 2, he'll probably be able to shoot a Kamehameha by the time he gets back.
Journeys of self-discovery aren't about that sort of training. No, never mind.
He might even be able to shoot an Evangelion.
T don't think Araragi has the talent. Oh, but I just happened to think of something, you know? Completely out of nowhere. Did you hear that Miss Hanekawa's house caught on fire?
What? What?
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a stupid question. How could Karen Araragi, the enforcer of those 2 defenders of justice, the Fire Sisters, she who single-handedly upholds peace in this town, not know about an incident of that magnitude?
Oh, yeah, of course. I know all about that. Real rough stuff. I was planning on visiting a visit on her.
She wasn't hurt, fortunately, because it happened while she was at school. But her home did go up in flames, and she doesn't have a place to stay tonight.
Huh? Really?
You didn't know?
Well, I did know. I was just thinking of bringing that exact topic up. Why'd you have to go and say it first?
I'm sorry, okay? But it really is strange, isn't it? To think that a good girl like Miss Hanekawa doesn't have a bed in the world she can sleep tight in. It feels like the most unjust thing imaginable. Like if justice really did exist in this world, what's it doing not helping her? So, since that hollow so-called justice won't do a thing for her, I'm actually taking the day off school looking for a place where she can sleep. Oh, speaking of which, you went to school today, like it was any other day? Did you have fun? While Miss Hanekawa was in trouble? Oops, sorry. There's no point in telling you, is there? You're just Koyomi Araragi's little sister. After all, nothing but a middle schooler. I'd be expecting far too much of you if I started treating you like him. Your big brother is your big brother, and you, Karen, are you. This really is some rotten timing. If only our guy was around. I know he would never abandon Miss Hanekawa. The Fire Sisters Lo, on the other hand.
Lol!
I'm so sorry I must only be a nuisance talking to you here when you can't do a thing without that big brother you love so very much. I didn't mean to worry you, not when, unlike Miss Hanekawa, you're enjoying your life. It's enough that she's in distress. We've been standing here and talking for quite some time now, so I think it's about time for me to go. After all, I understand now that justice is like a bed for Miss Hanekawa nowhere to be found in this world.
Hold on just a second.
Does something seem to be the matter?
A bed for Miss Hanekawa does exist, and so does justice.
Thus, deftly leading Karen along, Miss Senjogahara pulled off what she called her scheme well, describing it as deft might not be right. It was more like watching a bird fly straight into a window. I suppose that if you really wanted to, you could call it a scheme that she went after Karen and not Tsukihi, the strategist. So was that. I had come to the Yoragi residence, to its living room.
Just make yourself right at home, Tsubasa.
Treat it like it's your own home. Just like your own, Miss Hanekawa. With those words, Karen and Tsukihi poured me some tea. While the older sister dexterously took the chilled barley tea out of the refrigerator, the younger sister took glasses from the cupboard. They'd split up these duties without so much as a single advanced meeting. I was getting a first-hand look at how well the Fire Sisters... The Fire Sisters worked as a team. They were communicating silently. Your own home, huh? This wasn't actually the first time I'd entered into this house. I'd already gone in a number of times. I did work as Aragi's home tutor, after all, though I held classes at the library, not here, and I'd stayed late into the night in the past, like the time that Karen had collapsed with a fever. But it was a little different on this occasion. This was my first time, at this late date, being invited to the home as a guest. It made me weirdly nervous. Or maybe it's better to say that it made me feel oddly uncomfortable. Karen Aragi and Tsukihi Aragi. Aragi's little... The more I looked at them, the more they resembled him. You could even say they were his spitting image. I know it's a strange way to describe them, but they were like triplets who weren't the same age. Of course, their personalities, or rather their character traits, were quite different. Karen was a martial arts obsessed, handsome girl, and while there was something calm about Tsukihige, you could tell she had a firm core. It did surprise me that both of them had changed their hairstyles from when we'd last met. Karen had chopped off her distinctive ponytail to give herself bobbed hair. Her bangs were straight, just like me and Miss Senjogahara in the past. While Tsukihi had a thick braid wrapped around her neck like a scarf. Wasn't she hot? It was summer,
You know, Tsubasa, you're too standing-ish.
she said, sitting down on the sofa with just her own glass of barley tea in hand. She must have meant standoffish.
You should have come straight to me if you didn't have a place to sleep. I was really just waiting for you to say something, but I did think it might be hard for you, which is why I went and made the proposal on my own.
She had yet to realize that she'd been manipulated by Miss Senjogahara. Even the lie that she knew about the Hanekawa residence burning down, she seemed to believe it more than anyone else. I'd have worried about her future if I weren't so concerned for our middle school girl's dangerous here and now. You proposed it, Karen. All on your own. Trailing behind her sister with both her tea and mine in hand, this girl who sat smiling next to Karen seemed to have made a conscious decision to go along with Miss Senjogahara's plan. Yup, the younger one was pretty black-hearted. By the way, Karen was in her 3rd year of middle school, while Tsukihige was in her 2nd. When I saw the two of them seated there in the same clothes, Tsubinoki 2nd middle school uniforms, they really did seem like twins. There's a height difference between the two, so they don't when they're standing.
T was thinking, so barley tea is a tea made out of barley, right? Does that mean that it can become beer if it tries really hard?
She had such an incredible sense of closeness to others. This wasn't a conversation you had with someone 5 minutes after inviting them into your home. I wished she would start by calming my nerves. They do both start off as barley, but I guess the difference is that it's roasted for barley tea and fermented for beer. So, well, though I didn't know about trying really hard, you could say they were like relatives in the beverage world. I'd intended to say that they were completely different, but I had to admit her question actually did address the truth of the matter.
Huh, no wonder I get all excited when I drink barley tea.
Her conclusion, on the other hand, was a disappointing one. Karen chugged down an entire cup of barley tea in a succession of gulps. How stirring. Actually, upon closer inspection, these cups seemed really nice. Were they Baccarat crystal? They were nice enough that it almost felt rude to call them cups. What's more, judging by the way Karen and Tsukihige used them, they probably didn't know what these cost. Was the Araragi family in fact affluent? Anyway, Miss Hanekawa, if you don't have a place to stay, you're welcome at our home for as long as you'd like. Conveniently, our big brother isn't home right now, so use his room. Aragi's room? Yeah, he has one of those pointlessly bouncy beds, pointlessly enough. This was something that I knew. It was also what you might call the crux of Miss Senjogahara's scheme. I couldn't help but feel more than a little guilty that it took advantage of Tsukihi and Karen's youthful earnestness and sense of justice as the Fire Sisters, but I couldn't stand on ceremony either. Not when their favor came from a place of benevolence. Miss Senjogahara must have called it a scheme because she'd foreseen my own reaction to the situation, too. That's probably why she didn't tell me. So I didn't have to have known. She'd let the villainy of it fall on her own shoulders, so to speak. It was a complete mystery to me what kind of mental state you had to be in to place another woman, not just any but me, in your boyfriend's house to stay the night, but maybe her old self-punishing streak was still alive and well. She'd done it for me. And put up with the pain. Karen's earlier sentiment came back to make my heart ache when I considered that. I was standoffish. You should have come straight to me if you didn't have a place to sleep. I was really just waiting for you to say something. Just like when I stayed the night at Miss Senjogahara's, I never sought help for myself, and this seemed to be a totally different problem from what Mr. Oshino liked to say about people just going and getting saved on their own. I probably stopped caring about me. I wasn't even trying to get saved on my own. I recalled what Miss Senjogahara had told me earlier in the morning. I accepted blandness. Dull when it comes to darkness. A failure as a creature.
Tsubasa, what's wrong? Why are you all spaced out? Your face looks so stupid.
Karen didn't pull her punches when she spoke. My face looked so stupid.
Sit shocked from your house burning down after all? The only other case I know of is what happened to Nagasawa's place in Chibimaruko.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine, I found myself saying, though there was no way I could be. But yes, I think I'll take you up on your very kind offer to put up with me until Araji gets back then. I didn't know when that would be, but it'd probably take about as long as it took the persons who should be called my father and my mother to find a rental home. Without the slightest idea about either, there wasn't any point in thinking too deeply about it. Thank you very much.
No prob!
You're welcome! This somehow led to us shaking hands. There were 3 of us, too, which made it look more like we were in a huddle. Were we about to start playing volleyball or what? I didn't know what Miss Senjobahara had said about the Hanekawa's domestic situation. Actually, she didn't know about the Hanekawa's domestic situation, but I was honestly grateful that neither of them asked about it.
Let's have a pajama party and all. Tsubasa!
Do you think I'll pass?
We could play pro wrestlers.
Think I'll refuse.
Man, I've always wanted an older sister since I'm the eldest girl in our family. Can I call you Big Sis while you're staying over?
Karen was saying things that made her sound a little like Sengoku. Suki looked on with a smile. The picture made it hard to be sure which of the two was the older sister. That's when I noticed. Well, I guess I didn't notice anything. I'd known from the start. Right. If I'm going to be intruding here for a while, I'm going to have to say hello to your parents. I'd never properly met their father or mother during my previous visits to the Araragi residence, in part because all 3 siblings wanted it that way, yet, while the sisters could give me as much permission to stay over as they wanted, I'd have no choice but to leave if her parents said no. How would this go? Faced with the high school girl walking around town from bed to bed like some kind of net cafe refugee, wouldn't any sensible adult's judgment be to simply lecture her and convince her to go back to her parents' side? One, don't think you have to worry about that. These are the people we and our big brother call Mommy and Daddy. I think that gives you an idea of their personalities. Really? Still. They both have a hot-blooded sense of justice. They're not going to look at someone in trouble and tell them to get out. For some reason, Tsukihi was brimming with confidence. Now that I thought about it, I had no clue what kind of people Araragi's parents were. I suppose that's obvious since I'd never met them. But it was also in large part because Aragi didn't like to discuss the topic. I didn't pay this any particular mind, as it's natural high school boy behavior to be tight-lipped about one's parents, but he seemed particularly gauche about them. A sense of justice, though. A hot-blooded sense of justice at that. Something about it sounded unnatural. Hey, Karen? Tsukihi, I just wanted to ask, you said that both of your parents work, right?
Yup!
They nodded in unison. Think they'll come back at around 6 today. What exactly is it that they do? The 2 answered in unison.
They're police officers.
No wonder Araragi's been so guarded about it, I thought. And also, we must be living in the end times? There was, of course, some trouble. Though the grown-ups of the Araragi family had been appraised by their daughters as possessing a hot-blooded sense of justice, they also possessed the kind of good sense that adults and police officers had, so they had to wonder. Still, they allowed me to stay over much faster than I imagined they would, albeit reluctantly, saying, I guess we have to if that's your situation. Karen and Tsukihi's desperate pleas were a factor as well, but this really did make them seem like Araragi's parents. Both of them resembled him too. By the way, while the fact that family members resemble one another does of course have to do with genes, it seems that similar lifestyle cycles also play a major role. If you live under the same roof, live life at the same pace, and eat the same diet as someone, the materials that go into creating your bodies are the same. It makes sense, then, that the finished result of those materials will be similar, too. Conversely, if family members live their lives at a different pace and eat different diets, the way the Hanekawas do, they won't resemble one another. You could say that families with similar appearances and personalities have some degree of unity to them. And in that regard, the Araragi family was a healthy one. Having dinner with them and watching, I likewise felt, so this is what a family conversation looks like. I found it refreshing. and joined in, though I did feel a bit hesitant when Araragi's mom asked me every little thing she could think of about her only son. After that was bath time. I realized 3 days had passed since my last time in a bathtub. Maybe it's some rule for this installment because I ended up getting in together with Karen and Tsukihi. It got pretty cramped.
You never put on airs, do you, Tsubasa?
What follows is our conversation in that bathtub. The three of us were crammed in like in some experiment where you tried to stuff as many people as possible into a phone booth. In other words, it was amidst a thoroughly unsexy lack of elbow room that Karen said.
I don't know. Maybe I just think this because I'm stupid. But talking to the smart kids at school, I end up wondering all the time if they're really all that smart. They use weirdly hard words and quote stuff I don't care about. But even though you're smart, you talk to us eye to eye, and that makes me really happy.
Yeah! Tsukihi chimed in. She had undone her braid in the bath, and her hair was quite long. It seemed to grow at an even faster pace than Miss Kanbari's, like she was a monster or something. That seems to be the way it is, actually. People who are truly smart, or not even that, people you'd call first rate, whether it's in sports or whatever, can be surprisingly normal when you talk to them. It's not like they exude auras or anything. Maybe that means they don't need to dress themselves up because they're the real deal. While I felt a little uneasy about being praised like this, and while Suki was right about just how surprisingly normal first-rate people can be, I thought my case was different. I wasn't normal, and I wasn't smart either. I doubted there was anyone more vain and adorned than me. I knew it all too well from Golden Week and the eve of the Culture Festival. Enough to make me sick of it. Enough to make me hate it.
A lot of times, I wonder what the world looks like to a smart person. I wonder if we look at the same things and just see them differently. I just see a bunch of numbers when I look at pi, but maybe Einstein saw some kind of beautiful order.
I wonder... I replied vaguely. It was a difficult question to answer. One way, there were some geniuses with the kind of sensibility that allows them to look at pi or the golden ratio or whatever and find some kind of value or meaning in its mathematically functional beauty. But I didn't think it was a prerequisite for being smart. There had to be some smart people who saw pi as nothing more than a bunch of numbers. And the opposite was probably true too. It was nothing more than a matter of individual differences and not some kind of requirement. I doubted the gap between the ways Karen and Einstein saw the world was that different from how Karen and Tsukihi saw it. Do you think if you took a novel with a first-person narration and recounted it from another point of view, you'd have a completely different book? Like how a case told by Dr. Watson and a case told by Holmes himself feel quite different from each other. Now that I mentioned it, there were short stories in Sherlock Holmes's case files told from an omniscient perspective. But you'd be wrong to call those objectively correct worlds. There's no guarantee that God won't screw up. For example, take the careless creation of man. But now that I was stuck to Karen's toned and firm beauty, along with Sukihi's contrastingly cute and childish body, it made me think Araki is always getting to hang out with little sisters like these and couldn't help but comprehend his eccentric behavior to a certain degree, or something. We got out of the bath. I'd run out of the underwear from the 100 yen shop and was preparing to have to suck it up and re-wear something for just one night. But Karen let me borrow a brand new pair of panties. She even lent me some pajamas. After enjoying all of their hospitality so far, it would have been strange to decline, so I simply accepted both. Wait, but aren't these men's pajamas?
Huh? Oh, those are our big brothers.
Gurk. I wore Aragi's pajamas. I checked myself in the mirror. Why did it feel like I just made a big mistake? But taking them off now would only make me seem even more weirdly conscious about it. So no, that's just an excuse. Now that I'd worn them, I felt reluctant to take them off. So I just said normally, are they? They're the exact right size, which didn't even sound like I was hiding my embarrassment, and began brushing my teeth before bed. There was no way I could tell Miss Senjo Gahara about this. From there, I let the two sisters lead me to Araragi's room. When I thought about it, or without really needing to, I'd invaded Araragi's home totally without his permission, borrowed his pajamas, and was about to borrow his bed. You wouldn't be wrong to say I was rampaging here. I doubt he imagined permission from his family and his girlfriend could lead to all this. Perhaps I needed to send him a message. But I hesitated to do that too since I didn't have a clue about his current circumstances. Hey, I'm wearing your pajamas right now. Even if I did send such a text and he was able to receive it, it might just ruin what was surely the very serious situation he found himself in. Also, when I looked at the clock, I'd noticed this when I'd been in Aragi's room before, but for some reason it is 4. He isn't that punctual of a person, though. It was already past 9. He was probably meeting with Miss Kanbaru around now, and that would be a little, well, it made me hesitant.
Okay, Tsubasa, good night. You're free to do whatever you want with anything in this room.
Good night, Miss Hanekawa. I'll see you again tomorrow. The Araragi sisters left me with those words, and I was alone in his room. I didn't know what to do. Not that there was anything to do but sleep. I could try to study for the day, but I only had my school textbooks, and even those were Miss Senjogahara's. As I thought about how I might go to the library tomorrow and borrow some study aids, my eyes began to wander over Araragi's bookshelf. Time to check it over. While Karen had said I could do whatever I wanted with this room, it was Araragi's, so I couldn't really. But it seemed all right for me to peruse the books lining his shelf. The lineup had changed quite a bit from the last time I was there. He'd told me he never threw books away, so he had to be one of those people who stocked his bookshelf with unread titles, storing the read ones in a closet. I was surprised by how many novels there were. I'd imagined he read nothing but manga based on the way he talked and acted. I plucked a foreign novel from the shelf at random, sat in his chair, faced his desk, and read for about an hour. Of course, the feeling of Araragi I got from the desk and chair made it impossible for any of the sentences to make their way into my head. It was a little past 11 by the time I turned off the lights and lay in bed. Even then, thinking about how I was wearing Araragi's pajamas, how I was tucked into Araragi's bed, and how my head lay on Aragi's pillow made it impossible for me to fall asleep. His clock's hands must have been pointing straight up by the time I actually did. I could hardly criticize Araragi. Thinking about all of that was lewd of me.
A little after midnight, my master finally went to sleep, so it was time again for me to make my appearance. I do have to admit that during Golden Week, I never would have imagined that I'd wake up in that any-eyeing little human's room. Me three acquaints a man with strange bedfellows, and Nio, I was in a strange fellow's bed. What was I going to do about my master? I had no idea what Hitagi Senjogahara's intentions were when she set this all up, and maybe I was wrong about her, but I at least was frustrated by all of this. Not that there was anything I could do about it. In the end, I'm nothing more than my master. I can't go beyond her, and the thought makes me feel powerless. Alright. I got out of bed and onto all fours, then stretched my back moving like a cat does, then spoke to myself as if to make sure. Tidunyo, though, if I'm out here like this, it has to mean that my master is feeling some kind of stress again, but now I can't even guess what it is. I'd gone and pinned it on her house burning down, but it seems like it might be more than the fire if I keep showing up. That's how it seemed to be for me this time. I was basically my master during Golden Week, and I was so closely connected to my Aster before the Culture Festival that you could say I was like a mirror personality. But this time, my personality seemed to have been completely cut loose and divorced from hers. Was I developing independence as a nigh aberration now after all of these appearances? I'm nigh at smart, so I don't know, and I'm sure that Hawaiian shirted jerk would interpret it any other way. But things really are getting more convenient. Every time I show up appearing only while my master is asleep really gives me more room to breathe. They were all doing everything they could to make me go back into hiding the last 2 times. Mia, ha ha! They even got help from that pipsqueak vampire.
Who are ye calling a pipsqueak vampire?
Bro? I was speaking to myself but got an answer. I don't nigh but when I looked around, wait, I didn't know when. Well, she was sitting there in the room, meow, above the room on the ceiling, with her hands around her knees like she had always been there, from before the dawn of time. A young blonde girl. Shiniobu Ashinio was there. She was wearing a helmet with goggles on it the last time I saw her, but it looked like she knocked that off. Also, she was expressionless the last time I saw her, and during Golden Week too. But now I don't know exactly how to explain it. But she wore a gruesome smile as she looked down on me. I dunno, she might have been managing a smile now, but for some reason she seemed cuter back when she was expressionless. The vampire snorted confidently. She was making true. It was natural for her to feel confident since we'd fought twice and I'd lost twice as Black Hanekawa. As an afflicting cat or as an aberration, I was as good as neithing compared to her. Couldn't hold a candle to her.
It's been quite some time. Cat, I've not a clue why ye are here in the room of my lord and master, but I suppose only a boar would demand an aberration to account for its appearance.
It's not as if I'm that Hawaiian-shirted boy, the vampire added. I was planning to ask her what she was doing here, but now I realized she would be wondering the same thing about me. Wait. Weren't you trapped in that annie-eyeing little human's shadow? That should have been the case, according to my master's memories, so it didn't make sense for the vampire to be here unless that little human was around too, but he wasn't clinging onto the ceiling or anything. Nothing that scary was going on.
'Tis true, but a bit of an irregularity has occurred. At the moment, the pairing between my lord and master and I, in other words, between Shinobu Ashino and Koyomi Aragi, has been severed.
Severed? Morale, I tilted my head. I didn't.
In other words, we've reverted to the state that existed before the Hawaiian-shirted boy disappeared? No, 'tis even worse than those days. For I do not so much as know where my lord and master is, nor the state he is in. Honestly, telling you would do me no good.
She was giving up on me. It was probably the right. I can't understand any dialogue that goes on for more than 3 lines. But in any case, it seems like that little human really was in trouble. I mean, being cut loose from this vampire made it a pretty serious situation, right? There was the monkey, too. What could have happened to him anyway? I'm Neo, the kind of aberration to get worried about others. If anything, I hate him. But Nio hating my master, this would worry her so in that sense. You could say it was good timing that she had showed up while I was.
One had thought that perhaps my lord and master had returned to his home, but I now see what a fleeting hope that was. What's more, I find thee here instead. It's as though I've missed the forest and found the trees.
Even I knew she was using that idiom wrong. But I did get what you wanted to say. Again, it wasn't like me, but I decided I'd let her Nio. Nio about the idiom, but about her human. Your lord and my Aster should have been in that abandoned cram school at 9 lasty night. He had an appointment with the monkey girl.
An appointment? But why meet the monkey now? Ah, I see. Indeed, that is a clever plan by my lord and master's standards. It was not the aberration so much as that girl's lineage he was thinking of.
Her lineage?
Never mind, but this is a superb piece of information. Now my trip has not been in vain. Allow me to praise thee. I had thoughts of sucking thy blood to calm myself, but I shall refrain from as much as a show of gratitude.
I couldn't believe it. She was really thinking of doing that? Niao, that was a close one.
Or perhaps thou would prefer me to suck thy blood as a form of thanks. Thou art that woman's stress, so sucking thee up would bring her some relief, or so it should go.
Neil thinks I think I'll pass. Now that she mentioned it, though, she was right. The last 2 times my meister did get saved by her sucking my blood, but things were a little different this time around. What was different about me compared to before? I probably had a clear mission deal and, yeah, the kind of reason that's behind every aberration, but an unusual mission. Of course, I didn't know exactly what that was.
I see. Thou art akin to a new breed of aberration, and thus there are things about thee that both I and that Hawaiian-shirted boy are unfamiliar with. It would be wrong for me to make careless decisions about such matters. One could even compare thy previous appearances and thy current one to Terminator and Terminator 2.
Niall, that's an easy example for me to get, but she was alarmingly mainstream. Did that annoying little human show her those?
Of course, in any case, sucking thy blood would only be a palliative treatment of sorts, nothing more than a stopgap measure. 'Tis not a method that should be repeated too many times.
Yep, I agreed. I know you better than anyone how pointless palliative treatments, or solutions through brute strength were. Also, I couldn't forget, I may be making grand appearances, but at the end of the day, I was just my Aster's personality's flip side. I shouldn't be grandstanding, and I needed to needed to sneak around.
The front, the back, they are two sides of the same coin after all. Perhaps that is an overstatement, but it does at least seem to be reversible. While my lord and master excels at spinning his wheels, or perhaps going in circles, I must say I get a similar impression from thee. Well, this may strike thee as a commonplace tale, as it is surely in thy master's databank, but 'tis a meaningful recollection from my 500 years alive. So sit quiet and listen. An anecdote regarding the Emperor Napoleon, it seems he slept but 3 hours each day.
Oh, she was right. That was part of my master's knowledge. Actually, it was really well 9. Wouldn't anybody owe that one? Even that ignorant little human might have heard it. Of course, it seemed preposterous to call it a recollection. And what about it? Does that have something to do with me being awake while my master is asleep?
No.
Nyokai, I'm listening.
Meanwhile, this emperor was renowned for his love of baths. They say he bathed for over 6 hours each day. To compare him to a contemporary figure, think of Shizuka-chan.
First it was Terminator, and now it was Doraemon. She needed to do something about her lopsided knowledge.
They are saying many things these days about the subject, but perhaps, in the end, even Shizuka-chan will be censored. Though practically speaking, she in fact already is. On that note, the good old ending theme of Permin now seems crazy risky. To think that Perkal is just sitting there with her panties out. In fact, those words now suggest that even before any regulations are enacted wherever you look, self-censorship must be setting in. What a sad state of affairs.
I hate to burst your bubble while you're talking about this like it's someone else's problem, but if any regulations do get enacted, you're gonna be the first one getting censored. With all due respect, she shouldn't be worrying about the late creator of Doraemon and Perman.
Indeed. Oh, we've strayed from the topic?
Yeah, that's what you quieted me down to say. But in that case, I still had no idea what this vampire was trying to tell me. Meow? Meow. How little that emperor slept and how long he bathed for was famous, certainly more so than your average anecdote.
And when I learned those two things, I came upon a thought.
The vampire stated in a dramatic voice.
He absolutely must have been sleeping in the bath then.
Oh, now it made sense. That's what you got if you connected her too any ixie-dotes, putting aside the truth of the matter. According to my master's knowledge, he attended to government affairs while in the bath. It was one way to look at it.
So there are situations in which we're able to take two idiosyncrasies that in a sense could be called abnormal and connect them in our minds to arrive at an utterly sensible conclusion. Perhaps we could say that the way that a negative multiplied by a negative results in a positive, crossing one mystery with another creates a stable, proper result. In other words, what I'm trying to get across here is that matters that may appear to be unrelated may, contrary to expectations, be connected. It is pointless to separate two related sides, the front and the back, when considering them. Thou may indeed be Black Hanekawa, a personality cut loose from Tsubasa Hanekawa, but there are no clear differences between ye two.
Or so I think, the vampire said, and let out a gruesome laugh.
Aberrations and humans look alike to my eyes, after all.
Do they? Meow that I heard her say that. I felt like a little weight had been taken off my shoulders, and that a ton of bricks had been placed in my heart. Me and my master, the same, I knew it, I recognized it. I even said it myself, but now that she was saying it to me. T really mustn't let you suck my blood in that.
T suppose not. Yes, natural extinction is in fact the best course of action. From an expert's point of view, of course, but from an aberration's point of view as well.
So, vampire, if you want to thank me, do you think you can answer a question I have?
Well, that'd be quite fine with me, but please, I ask thee to be quick. I must hasten to my lord and master's side. If this meeting was to take place at 9, then he may not be in the same location. That hapless fool will get himself killed this time, if I do tarry.
She might have acted carefree, but it seemed like she was in a tight spot too. So, as requested, I asked her point blank. Do you know about a tiger?
A tiger?
Yep, a tiger. A tiger. A mammal belonging to carnivore. Dash is wandering around this town right now.
There are countless tiger aberrations. A significant number that I myself am familiar with, and if thou were to add that Hawaiian-shirted boy's knowledge,
the tally would easily break 50, the vampire informed me. Meow! Niall, that was the problem. I couldn't even grasp such a number as 50. Well, for my part, I have my Meister's knowledge, but it isn't enough to pin it down. I know it's a terrible aberration, but I don't have a clue what it really is.
Indeed, to name a thing is to fix its identity, whether 'tis my Shinobu Ashino or that Black Hanekawa. Not knowing the name of a thing and thus not seeing its true form makes it dreadfully frightening. That is how it works. One who is no one is more terrifying than anyone. The fears of an anonymous society are nothing new. Have you any clues aside from it being a tiger?
TT was a big tiger.
Tigers are, in general, big. Now, if it were a small tiger,
It was super.
tigers are, in general, fast. Now, if it were an immobile tiger,
And it talks.
TT talks?
That one made the vampire react. Pretty.
An aberration that takes the form of an animal yet speaks, that is, I might say, quite uncommon. But I feel as though hearing that has further obscured its identity.
The vampire said, standing up. Though that sounds wrong because her feet were on the ceiling, she skillfully held the hem of her dress between her thighs to keep it in place. Should we call that prim? On the other hand, her blonde hair was all upside down.
'Tis impossible for me not to have noticed an unknown aberration prowling around this town.
Now that she said it, I realized she was right. A little sardine like me could do whatever I wanted, but there was no way this king of aberrations of unlife wouldn't have spotted a aberration as powerful as that crawling around. An iron-blooded, hot-blooded, yet cold-blooded vampire. Neo-aberration can say they aren't food to her. But that's not something you'd be paying attention to, Noon.
No, that's precisely why. How could I possibly let an aberration escape my notice in my situation? 'Twould be a bolt from the blue. And so you saw this tiger?
That's right. You'd exactly. My Meister saw it, so I saw it.
Which would mean perhaps that is where we ought to focus. In other words, an aberration only visible to the two of thee, a tiger only visible to the two of thee. 'Tis a possibility. Sorry that I cannot be of help.
I shall think of another way to show my gratitude, promised the vampire, calmly walking along the ceiling so she could leave the room from the window. She must have been headed to that abandoned cram school. I thought. There wasn't any reason to show any more kindness to her since she didn't even let me know the identity of this aberration. But it was true that I'd wasted her time. I might as well give that back to her. Neo thought I was doing it for that little human. Hey, vampire.
What is it, Cat?
Let me take you there. I could get to those ruins in one leap. Now need to be cautious. You can't fly right, Niao. I bet never leap so high you look like you're flying. It's not a big deal for me, but it'd save you 30 minutes. The vampire looked indecisive, or really like she didn't wanna, for just a moment, but then hopped from ceiling to floor, or actually down onto the bed. It had powerful springs, so she ended up bouncing back up and doing a pointless roll in the air, though I gotta admit I was impressed by her clean landing.
Then would ye be so kind?
I'd feared that there was a slight high chance that this proud vampire would reject my proposal, but she practically decided on the spot. So that's how serious the situation was. Yeah, come to think of it, while she didn't make it sound like a big deal, her pairing with that annoying little human getting severed wasn't just bad, it could be catastrophic. After all, that meant he'd lost his immortality. On the other paw, since the vampire had been sitting and standing on the ceiling, she might have regained some of her vampirism, but it was really bad news if he was deprived of his immortality. He was only able to survive this long thanks to it. Yet now, of course I would, but I'm only taking you close by because that's what my master wants. She doesn't want to get in that little human's way when he's in a fix.
Well, it may be unlike her, but 'tis wise. True, she did have a nasty experience or two over spring break, where her rash, self-righteous deeds only served to plunge my lord and master into ever greater suffering.
I had those memories too. I didn't exist as me back then, but I had those memories. If you ask me, there was my more than that to her deeds. But the vampire was right for the Mio's part.
'Tis pointless to argue if the lesson has been learned. Very well then, that would be of great assistance on its own.
Okay. I picked up the vampire. Right in my energy drain activated from the mama met, I touched the vampire, but she didn't seem to mind Naya. That's what I call tough nerves. I opened the lock on the window and stepped onto the frame. I was barefoot, like I always am, but I could just wipe off after I got back. I was lucky too. The room had wet tissues that the little human seemed to use to clean. He sure liked cleaning, meow. Speaking of which, I wanted to know how did the vampire get into this room? Well, the thought occurred to me there was no point in asking that kind of question about an aberration. So without a thought, I just jumped. Toward Ika Cram School. But the vampire and I couldn't head toward the building well. We were able to head to its location. After all, I had set my heading, aimed for it, and jumped. But we couldn't arrive there. Because where we landed and arrived lacked the building that should have been there, the abandoned cram school. What was there was cinders. The ruins of the abandoned cram school, a refuge for Koyomi Araragi and Shinyabu Ashinio, a home to Miyam Ashinio for months, a place filled with memories for my master for Hitagi Senjogahara, for Saruga Kambaro, for Nagetoko Sengoku had been incinerated.
What happened? The section number got double points scored in one night. I don't know about the other times, but this I can't ignore. No. I'm not overlooking this. What the heck happened while I was asleep? What kind of grand adventures took place for us to skip 25 sections? An entire novel's worth of tales weren't told just now. You get the idea. Putting aside silly meta-commentary, I really couldn't help but feel that something was off now that we'd gone this far. The bed in those ruins, I supposed I could understand. Rather attached to the lovingly handmade cot I'd worked so hard to put together, I'd been able to get a good night's sleep, my feelings helping to make up for any of its shortcomings. At least, part of me felt that way, and also that the good night's sleep I got at Miss Senjogahara's house was assisted by a reaction to the adverse conditions from the previous day when I'd camped out in an abandoned building. The two cases may appear to contradict one another, but they could both make sense if you thought of them together. Just like those two anecdotes about Napoleon. Let's also put aside the question of when I thought of the Imperial episodes. It didn't seem like my kind of idea. And ask, getting a sound night of sleep in Araragi's bed. Me? I'd woken up feeling completely refreshed. And emotionally calm, too? How could that be? I don't know if I should say this, but I was nervous from the moment I got under his sheets. If I were to put it in shameless terms, I was so exhilarated that I was in no shape to sleep. It was as if I'd experienced firsthand what Miss Senjogahara said about not being able to sleep using her father's bedding. And in that sense, Araragi's sheets couldn't have been more uncomfortable. Not to mention that I also had his pajamas on. It was like feeling Aragi with my whole body. If I'd gotten a good night's sleep in that situation, I might as well rest in peace as a girl. Not being able to get a wink of sleep would be going too far, but it ought to have been shallow, and yet I felt re-energized. What an invigorating morning. It was clearly aberrant, clearly an alteration, an aberration. Ha! I rose slowly and examined my body. There would have to be marks left behind if something had happened to me. Maybe it was my imagination. But there had to be proof, something that would let me know if my nerves were tougher than I imagined, or if they weren't. There had to be something left behind. And I found it right away. First, there were the pajamas I'd borrowed from Aragi apart from the night sweats I'd soaked it with. I noticed they had the slight smell of dirt to them. If smell of dirt is too vague, maybe I should say an outdoor smell. Tea went outside while I was sleeping? Like a somnambulist? I sat cross-legged as I mumbled to myself and bent over like I was stretching before a run to check my feet next, primarily my soles. But there was nothing there. Size 7.5 feet. Very clean. But I said, my eyes resting on the box of wet tissues on top of Aragi's study desk, or so I call it, but I'm sure it wasn't until very recently that it started being used for that purpose. I was right. It wasn't in the same place as yesterday. By about an eighth of an inch, I got out of bed and peeked inside the wastebasket by the desk. Just as I expected, there were a number of used wipes, and they were stained with dirt and gravel. That would mean, I thought as I looked at my hands, just like my soles, my hands were clean too, but not under my fingernails. A slight bit of dirt was present, some very rugged nail art. to have heard of catching a criminal thanks to the grit under their fingernails, but this is no joke. Muttering, I looked to the window next. Nothing said that I must have left through the window, but when I considered Golden Week, it was hard to imagine that I'd bothered to walk out into the hall, descend the stairs, and open the front door to leave. The window was the closest exit and the rational route to pick. And though it was a lucky shot, my prediction hit its mark. The window's sliding lock had been left undone. I had, of course, made sure that everything was locked before heading to bed last night. That degree of caution was inevitable after Miss Senjogahara had gotten as mad at me as she had. And yet, in other words, someone had opened the lock to this window while I was sleeping. And since I was the only person in this room, that someone had to be me. Don't know about criminal, but I do feel like a culprit getting pinned down by a great detective. Of course, culprits in detective novels wouldn't leave so much evidence. What great detective would be inspired to work on such a case? It would get tossed wholesale to the men and women of Scotland Yard, but then again, a case with a changing cat, as the culprit might be fit for a good old-fashioned great detective, or so I thought. Then, as if to strike the finishing blow, I went back to the bed and grabbed the pillow. Araragi's pillow it may have been, but that didn't matter right now. If I'd spent even a moment lying in bed while in that state. There it is, our conclusive evidence. I picked a single hair from the pillow. Male or female, any human's hair is constantly replacing itself. It's normal for some strands to fall from your head while you're sleeping. That much is natural. But the question was why this hair was white. White hair. No, maybe I should call it white fur, because it looked less like human hair and more like body hair from an animal. So it's happening again. I'm turning into the afflicting cat, into Black Hanekawa. I didn't want to believe it or even think about it, but there was no point in running from reality when the situation was so certain. I wasn't going to continue denying the facts until cat ears actually grew out of my head the way they did the day before the culture festival, or so I thought before I had my doubts and checked the mirror on top of the desk. It was fine. They hadn't sprouted. Not yet. And I realized this is a completely unrelated digression. It struck me that Araragi might actually be a bit of a narcissist if he had a mirror sitting on top of his desk at all times. What a weird kid. Okay, anyway. But when I step back and think through it all, it's not. There seem to be a lot of differences from last time, and the time before that. There was no headache signaling what was going to happen, and given how I've been able to return to normal without Aragi, anything past that was going to be pure conjecture, but I had probably Black Hanekawa feed when I spent the night in the ruins, and when I stayed over at Miss Senjogahara's home, too pure conjecture, but I was almost sure I was right. I say that because it finally explained why I felt so refreshed. Yet I turned back. I turned back into me. Could that mean I've gotten used to becoming Black Hanekawa? Just like how Aragi is able to make good use of his immortality. Immortality? It was strange that word, too, seemed to snag against something somewhere in my brain. But what? Really, now what happened while I was asleep? Something must have happened. Something very significant. Of course, I do have an idea why I became Black Hanekawa again. The house fire. It couldn't be anything else. Black Hanekawa is a manifestation of my stress flipside personality who shoulders feelings that are too much for me. It's probably not going well to relieve my stress again. There'd be more obvious marks left behind in that case. But it also felt like wishful thinking. Either way, having a blank space in my memories was discomforting. Dearie me, I wonder if Black Hanekawa will whisk this stress right away for me, too. I said in jest as I began changing clothes. If there was no point in running from reality, then I faced another unshakable truth. Even though I discovered that I was turning into Black Hanekawa, there was nothing I could do about it, and I had to go to school. I needed to talk to Aragi or Mr. Ishino about it, but I didn't have them either. I could be absent again and say it was due to psychological exhaustion from that house burning down. The thought occurred to me, but it felt hard to do so now that I realized I was offloading the exhaustion to someone other than myself. And, to be completely honest, I also wanted to ask Miss Kambaro if she'd been able to meet Aragi yesterday, and if he was okay. I didn't know her phone number or email address, so direct contact was the only option. I suppose there's another way, which is to go through Miss Senjagahara, but she's so sharp that she might get a hint that I've been turning into Black Hanekawa. No, this was her we were talking about. Maybe she'd gotten that hint already. I seem to recall her suggesting as much. Then, just as I finished changing into my school uniform, Miss Hanekawa! Tsukihi's voice came from the other side of the door and made me jump. Oh no. Was I talking to myself too loudly at someone else's home? Did she hear me? Fortunately, that didn't seem to be the case.
Hey, are you up? If you aren't, wake up! Okay, it's time to eat, okay? The Araki family has a rule where we always have breakfast together.
Thanks, I got it. Don't worry, I'm awake. I'll be right there.
Okawaii.
The cute voice said, and I heard the sound of footsteps going the other way down the hall. Oh, was I feeling let down? Araragi described his sisters rousing him from bed every morning like they were a pretty big nuisance, but what could possibly be annoying about this adorable wake-up call? Really? He shouldn't. The way he described it, he was liable to give people the wrong impression, as if they practically attacked him in his sleep with a crowbar. Thinking this, taking one last look in the mirror, and with my contact lenses in hand, meaning to drop by the bathroom before heading to the living room, I left Aragi's den. Meow. A rule about always eating together? As far as I could tell, Araragi was constantly breaking this rule, but now wasn't the time to be asking about that. He probably wouldn't want to hear it from me, and I didn't want to say it either, but Araragi seemed to have trouble maintaining a comfortable distance between himself and his family. That obviously included Karen and Tsukihi, but also his father and mother. Then again, the nuance seemed to shift a bit when I took into account that both of his parents were police officers. And so, to this mom of his, I said I'll be on my way at the entrance before heading out. Karen and Tsukihi had left about half an hour earlier since their middle school was farther away, and put my hand on the doorknob when she called out.
Hanekawa-chan,
To me.
T don't know what your family situation is, and I don't plan on asking you about it at the moment. But please don't think it's normal to be away from your parents and leaving our home with "until be on my way." That's the one thing I don't want you thinking. While we can host you, it's not as if we can bring you into our family, no matter how much Karen and Tsukihi adore you like an older sister. Oh, I don't want you to get the wrong idea. I'm not saying you're a bother. Karen and Tsukihi are delighted you're here and you're Koyomi's friend, so we want to treat you as well as we can. And I've heard that you're to thank for his newfound motivation to study.
No. Not at all, I replied. How do I explain it? Aragi's mother resembled him, but there was a kind of satori in her eyes. Like she saw things for what they are. I felt like I understood why Araragi didn't like dealing with his mother, even if you took away the fact that she was a police officer. I'm sorry. I seem to have worried you unnecessarily, but there isn't anything really worth mentioning about my family situation. I don't know. I guess you could say we're not on the best terms. That's all.
You know that parents being on bad terms with their child is a kind of abuse on its own. You need to ask for help if you're ever in trouble. That could be a public agency. Or you could ask Koyomi. He can be surprisingly reliable.
Yes! I knew that.
Monogatari series by Nisio Izen, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website, artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story.
I knew very well just how reliable Araragi was. I'd always known, and yet, I tried my best not to rely on him. I was unable to rely on him.
A family isn't something that you need to have, but it should be a happy one if it exists. That's what I think. As a mother.
As a mother.
Hanekawa-chan, it's okay for people to go ahead and run from bad things, but just looking away doesn't count as running. No one on the outside can lend you a hand while you're consenting to the way things are, so maybe you could start by speaking up about it.
Mrs. Araragi saw me off with those words, rather long be safe, and replied to my I'll be on my way. My goodness. Mothers really are strong was my dumb impression. I felt totally owned. But it wasn't the worst feeling. Mother, huh? That was another thing that I didn't know of until now. What in the world, I wondered, had I been doing all this time? Not just at night during afternoons and mornings, too. Just looking away doesn't count as running. Those are some weighty words. I was overcome with admiration. That was closer to something that Mr. Oshino might say, rather than Aragi.
And so, chewing over the words, I headed to school, but en route, I ended up face to face with something that I wished I could indeed look away from. No, really, I wanted to turn around on the spot and go back the way I came. A boy with golden eyes and hair came walking down my path. His physique made him seem my age, but describing his face as young would be an understatement. His baby face, with its clear signs of immaturity, made him look like a middle schooler. But for a middle school boy, the look in his golden eyes, fixed straight forward in a glare, couldn't be any worse. Of course, unlike Spring Break, he didn't have a gigantic silver cross resting on his back, which may have softened his image. I really was thinking about changing course, but he noticed me a moment before I was able to make that decision. His golden eyes with that terrible look acquired me. My eyes met his. Head on. Oh, what were you called again? You're that girl who nearly got herself slaughtered by me the other day? Gotta love it.
Him, the half-vampire and vampire hunter episode, pointed at me, looking truly amused as he spoke. Hello. I tipped my head. Long time no see, Mr. Episode. He didn't seem very troubled by this meeting, but I was finding it as awkward as could be, and it was coming through my speech. But it made sense. Just as he'd said the other day during spring break, I nearly got myself slaughtered by him. No, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he actually killed me after all. He sent more than half of the organs in my torso flying. He'd originally come to this town chasing after Shinobu, a legendary vampire. Then, in order to defeat her, he ended up having to fight Araragi, her thrall, and that's when my painful experience took place. It was my fault for sticking my nose into a duel between two guys, but still, didn't he feel bad at all? I heard that you went straight back to your home country afterwards. Why have you returned to this town, Mr. Episode? I did so wondering if he might have, in order to try and defeat Araragi and Shinobu again. He could be the source of the trouble Aragi seemed to be in. As an expert in the field, Mr. Oshino would have settled all of that with flair, but he wasn't omnipotent. Perhaps Araragi and Shinobu had been exposed through some oversight, but the half-vampire, he was fine being in the sun so he could get to work first thing in the morning, only smiled a wicked grin at my question.
Gotta love it. What are you doing calling me Mr. Episode? I'm not old enough for anyone to be calling me Mr. yet, and why would anyone want to be polite to me?
What? But he was a vampire, half so, as he may have been. Didn't that mean he had a pretty long lifespan?
Gotta love it. Having a long lifespan doesn't necessarily mean that I'm old. This is supposed to be a secret. But I'll tell you for kicks, you're way older than I am right now, this very day. I'm 6 years old.
6?
I couldn't hide my shock. Maybe that was the reaction, Mr. Episode. Legion? Episode wanted, as he looked delighted.
It's my birthday next month, so I'll be 7 then. But my parent on the vampire side of my family seems to have been a fast-maturing aberration, and I show some traces of that. Hey, don't judge people by their appearances. Not that I'm a human, of course.
Lee Episode put an end to the topic, leaving me with no way to figure out the truth of anything he'd said. It seemed possible that he was just making fun of me. If he was going to talk about judging others by appearances, though, there was something I wanted him to explain even more than his age. It was a blazing hot August morning, so why was he wearing the same white traditional school uniform he had on over spring break? Maybe he didn't feel hot because he was a half-vampire. So, he wasn't a high schooler or a middle schooler. Age-wise, he was a grade schooler and even younger than Shinobu in my eye. Forget Lee Episode. You could even call him Whittle Episode. He didn't have a baby face. In fact, he looked old for his age. I couldn't deny feeling that it was a little late to be learning this kind of hidden backstory. I mean, talk about a non-existent youth. And also, do you not have that cross with you?
Hmm? Oh, course not. I'd stand out if I walked around with that thing, duh.
Huh. So he was at least conscious about that kind of thing. Are you going to answer my question about why you came back to this town?
What? Man, you really want to know, don't you? Well, I owe you one, and I'd love to tell you.
He seemed to think of nearly killing me as some sort of debt, at least. I felt a little relieved.
But I don't know why I came to this town yet myself. I got summoned down here out of nowhere and just arrived this morning on a night bus.
Night bus? How oddly proletarian. Or was he some sort of tourist? And what do you mean you were summoned?
People summon me places. For the most part, I'm a freelance vampire hunter. I'm not like dramaturgy and guillotine cutter. I'm a mercenary. I do what I want, and I'll work for anyone as long as the money is good.
So you accept jobs without even hearing what they are?
Well, I got paid up front, and I had my reasons for taking this one. Who cares what the job is, though? Put me on it, and I'll kill anyone so hard that there won't even be after effects to deal with.
Then is there a chance that you'd accept a tiger extermination job?
Tiger extermination? Well, I'm a hunter who specializes in vampires. Tigers are a little... What? Did the Shogun make a ridiculous request or something?
The Shogun... Why did he know the old tale about the Zen monk Ikkyu? Was the Ministry of Education approved anime about him an international hit? I ended up with no reply to my question. I did want to get an answer out of him, but there was nothing I could do if he didn't know. But I was surprised by how much of a normal conversation we were having. I had a lot of other bigger ideas about Lee episode in my head, even though we'd only had contact with each other for a few hours in total during spring break with everything between him and Aragi. But this is what he was like if you got to meet him while the sun was out, huh? It was almost like the saying goes, behind every ghost is a silver tongue. He was such a normal kid it was almost a letdown. While he definitely didn't look 6 or 7, it absolutely felt like I was talking to a younger boy now that we were here on the side of the street. The white school uniform was nothing more than his self-conscious idea of fashion.
But was it Tsubasa Hanekawa?
However, something almost identical to the impression that I got of him he had as well.
Compared to the last time we met, you've gotten real normal.
What?
He said it directly and without embellishment, so the words rang heavy in my heart. I mean, just now I have the sight of a vampire but couldn't tell who you were for a second. And no, I'm not talking about how you cut your hair or how you don't have glasses. It's something more essential. That, what would you call it, overwhelming presence I felt coming from you last time. It's clean gone, almost like it's been cut loose from you without a trace.
I understood what he was trying to say. It wasn't something I understood until he said it, but the me that episode knew was the me during spring break. Me before Black Hanekawa was born inside of me. Me before I took everything black about me and set it loose as an aberration. Which is why, no. But hold on a second. Saying I was normal, or that I'd lost whatever presence, was almost like... It made me think back to what Karen said the day before in the bath. You never put on airs, Tsubasa, but it's not that I don't put on airs. It was that I couldn't put on airs now. Of course, there'd be no way for me to put on any airs after I'd taken my individuality and set it loose. No. Wasn't right. That was even less right. This line of thought probably didn't end well. Probably some truth that I didn't want to behold lay beyond.
Oh, what to me was a shocking statement seemed to be nothing more to episode than a thought he happened to voice. He already seemed uninterested in the topic as he spotted something to my back. Using his self-professed vampire sight, he'd spotted someone behind me. There you go. Over there, that's who summoned me out here without even saying why. I started asking questions, and it seems like she was that Hawaiian-shirted asshole Mimoshino senior back in college, which is why I had to take this job. It meant this had some kind of connection to me.
I turned around. She introduced herself as Izuko Gain, a young dame whose large clothes looked quite casual on her small frame. But, of course, while I call her a young dame, this was just after I had been completely unable to figure out how old episode was, so I didn't have much confidence in my ability to guess ages. I would believe you if you told me she was in her 20s, but if she really was Mr. Ishino's senior, she had to be over 30 at least. To be honest with you, though, I could see her as being in her teens to be. Actually, though, I say this after all of that speculation, she was composed in a way that made it seem a little pointless to try to pin down her age something about her. seemed to stand apart, just as it's boorish and meaningless to look at a masterful work of art and immediately start thinking about the year and age of its production, its origin, or who its creator is. She shut down such questions. In that sense, her casual dress looked just right on her. A regular person wearing XL-sized clothes on an S-size physique risked giving the impression of only being slovenly. But to be frank, she looked refined. She wore a baseball cap tilted to the side and the heels of her sneakers were crushed. But it didn't strike you as improper or inelegant. It all fit perfectly in her brand of fashion.
Hey, Sodi were taking forever to show up at our meeting spot, so I decided to come get you. Now that I'm here, it looks like you were in the middle of hitting on a girl. Sorry if I got in your way?
That was her greeting. She spoke with an amiable smile. There was something odd about the way she talked, like she was providing a running commentary on her actions. It felt like she was using her smile to cover up that oddness.
Isn't the young lady Tsubasa Hanekawa, is it?
Oh, yes. Hearing my name before I'd given it, I was confused. In part, I was already astonished because episode said she was Mr. Ashino's senior. But even if she'd heard about me from Lai, episode or Mr. Ashino, unless she also had this vampire sight thing, there was no way she could recognize me as Tsubasa Hanekawa with my cut hair. Dash. Yes, that's me.
Well, what a surprise. I'm glad I decided to act on a whim and come here because it meant getting to meet you, Tsubasa. Meme probably didn't tell you, but I was ahead of him in college, and my name is Izuko Gain. He used to call me his senior. There are a lot of situations in my life where people call me that.
So she said she really did speak in an odd way, and it was a strange self-introduction.
Please don't call this hitting on her. Miss Gay and I just happened to meet a familiar face, and the two of us were reminiscing, that's all.
Well, that doesn't matter either way.
It really didn't seem to matter to her.
So if you're done with your reminiscing or whatever it is, why don't we go? Time is wasting and we're racing against the clock. Yatsugi will probably be coming too, but we can't wait around for that to happen.
Yatsugi? Who's that?
It doesn't matter who, not to you, Sode. But there are some folks for whom that isn't true, and for example, it's not true for me. Well, to tell you the truth, I wish either Meme or Dishu were here, but the two of them are such drifters. By the way, I don't want Yatsugi to be here, not at all.
You're really only able to think about yourself when you talk, huh? It's like you assume whoever you're talking to knows everything you know.
Hey, Tsubasa! I know that normally I should edge my way into this conversation between you and Sode and maybe go to a vending machine and buy you 2 sodas as the adult in this situation, but the circumstances are like, I just gave. Sorry, but I'm taking soda with me.
Oh. Okay. That was fine with me. In fact, I would be breathing a sigh if she took him and left. He was still scary to me. Despite everything, I'd actually lost all my memories about the time he nearly killed me, but my body must still remember. My stomach was swirling, and I needed to complete my trip and get to school. Being treated to a soda would only complicate things.
So I can't help you with this tiger problem that you're having either. Figure out how to take care of it on your own, okay?
What? My tiger problem. Wait, how did she know? Could she have heard me mentioning it in passing to episode earlier? No, that seemed unnatural given the distance. Compared to getting my name right, this was almost another dimension of unnaturalness. It wasn't like she had read my mind. I hadn't thought about the topic a single time while I was speaking to her.
Why the strange expression? You can't be that shocked just because I knew about the tiger. There's nothing that I don't know.
There's nothing that you don't know.
Yep, I know everything.
Full of confidence. Like she really did know everything, like she had a grasp of the entire tale.
Anyway, you'll probably end up facing the tiger sometime today or tomorrow. You're about to name this peerless and all-powerful aberration the Kako, the tyrannical tiger, but no one is going to be able to help you with it. No one is going to save you, because this problem is your own. It isn't my problem, and it, of course, isn't the problem of the boy you're in love with.
Wow.
What do you...
I began to say before losing the words. The boy I'm in love with?
I'm talking about Koyomi Araragi. Don't tell me you don't know that.
Said Miss Gain, like it was the most natural thing, like it was common sense, like it was something known by every human other than me. And in fact,
You don't know a thing, Tsubasa, do you? You don't even know that you don't know anything. Not the wisdom of being simple, but the simplicity of being simple. You're thick and naive. Haha, thick and naive sounds a bit naughty, like I'm talking about how full-figured you are. As a slender person, I'm quite jealous. Then again, maybe you're better off without the wisdom of being simple. Remember how the brainless scarecrow always lamented the unbearable fact of his stupidity?
what? My voice shaking. I didn't know why my voice was shaking, even when I faced episode over spring break. My voice, my body never shook so badly. What do you know about me?
I know everything. And that's why.
I know everything, repeated Miss Gain. Again and again, like she'd repeated it time after time in the past, like good morning or good night or thank you or you're welcome. She repeated it and repeated it.
I even know that you don't know anything. But that's nothing to be ashamed of, since no human in this world knows anything. People try to make do unknowingly in living. You're not an exception. You're not special.
I'm not an exception. I'm not special.
It makes you happy to hear that, doesn't it? I know. And of course, I also know quite well that the ruins of that abandoned cram school, a spot that should have a place in all of your hearts, including Mime's, burned down last night. Oh, is that another piece of information that you don't know yet? My cute little Tsubasa, who doesn't know a thing.
Miss Canberra is absent. Having dashed into class just before the late bell, this is of course a figure of speech. I would never run in the hallways. I walked how a competitive walker might, which was sort of suspicious. Well, nothing short of suspicious. I only visited Miss Canberra's second-year classroom during our break after first period.
Oh, it's Miss Hanekawa. The senior, it's really her. Miss Kanbari is always talking to her. That's Miss Hanekawa. She's classmates with Miss Senjagahara. No, we should be calling her Mr. Aragi's savior.
For some reason, I was extraordinarily famous there. I wanted to hide my face and run away, but stood firm and asked about Miss Kanbaro and received the aforementioned answer. She hadn't contacted anyone, not her homeroom teacher, not her friends in class, and while it may be obvious when you think about it, I was relieved that she had friends among her classmates.
She's an incredibly serious girl, so it's really rare for her to have an unexcused absence. We're all worried about her.
While I knew this was a case of the same person having different reputations in different communities, there seemed to be a particularly steep gap in the way Miss Kambari appeared to our eyes and her classmates. No, maybe that was as it should be. People like me, who appeared the same to everyone, like a carbon copy, were the strange ones. It wasn't to be expected. It wasn't normal. Someone that everyone saw as a model student would be abnormal.
Do you know something, Miss Hanekawa?
No, I'm sorry, I don't know anything. The words must have rung cold, and the girl I was talking to gave me the most dubious look she could manage. Embarrassed, I left the classroom as if I was running away. After that experience, I couldn't put myself into any of my classes from second period onward, and I want to give my sincerest apologies to all of the teachers who took the time to conduct them, but how could I not be worried? Unsurprisingly, Aragi had taken today off as well. What could have happened last night? No. If I'm being honest about it, I couldn't put myself into my first period class either. I couldn't calm down after hearing from Miss Gain that I call Crane School had burned to the ground. Not only did it have a place in all of our hearts, it was where Araragi and Miss Kambara were going to meet. And it caught on fire. I, of course, had searched for the news online, using my cell phone after parting ways with Miss Gain an episode, and discovered that she wasn't lying. There was even an image attached to the story. I saw the photo of a plain concrete building that had literally turned into a pathetic pile of rubble, the place in my heart where so many things had happened. It had up and vanished from this world. wondering what Miss Senjugahara would think once she found out. And at the same time, struck with an indescribable feeling of the transience of life, I also understood that this was no time for sentimentality. Last night, really, what could have happened? Were Araragi and Miss Kanbaruo okay? I was so worried that whether I was in class or on break, I couldn't sit still the whole day. Even so, the fact that I was able to keep taking classes throughout the day and not leave early must have meant that some part of me was sure that the two were safe. Somewhere inside me was a me who was certain that they hadn't been harmed in any way by the fire. I thought these feelings were trust at first. That this was Araragi and Miss Kanbaro, so I didn't need to worry. That I believed those two could get out of any situation, no matter how dire. But it didn't take much for me to realize that was wrong. I couldn't rest easy about Araragi in that sense at all. He was a boy who clung precariously to life, who could very well die at any moment, someone whose tendencies were more self-punishing than self-sacrificing. My familiarity with him was what made it all the harder for me to believe that he was okay in this situation. And as for Miss Kinbaro, she and I were, unfortunately, not close enough that I could just decide to believe that she was safe. Maybe she even saw me as an enemy given my relationship with Miss Senjo Gahara. So why was I sure that the two were safe, or at least that they weren't harmed by the fire? It's because I know. I was on my way back from school. No, I couldn't call it my way back because I wasn't going straight back to the Aragi residence and was instead planning on taking a detour. Yes, I know that the fire had nothing whatsoever to do with Aragi or Miss Kanbara. I knew. I might not know, but a me who wasn't me knew. Probably last night, when I became Black Hanekawa, I saw it and knew. Knew that the two of them were safe. Knew that Aragi and Miss Kambaru must have met and moved to a different location. Knew that they and the fire were mostly separate problems. So just like Miss Gaines said, this case was mine. To begin with, these fires must be me. The Hanekawa residence had burned down just 3 days ago, and the Aikau ruins went up in flames a day ago. In 3 short days, 2 buildings I was deeply involved with had burned to the ground. There had to be something wrong with you if you didn't consider the two connected. Plus, both incidents happened right after I saw the tiger. How could you not mind that? They didn't know what caused the Hanekawa house fire. And as far as the online news article said, the cause was also unknown for the abandoned cram school. Given that there didn't seem to be any potential for fire there, they did of course suspect arson, but arson, the worst of all possibilities, crossed my mind. I, as Black Hanekawa, am the culprit. In other words, the possibility that I'm the arsonist. When I thought back to the outrageous spree that Black Hanekawa had perpetrated over Golden Week, it seemed like a very real scenario, and in fact, I couldn't deny having thought again and again about the Hanekawa residence. I hope it just disappears, and in a way, my wish had come true. So you could say it was a strong possibility. But this seemed wrong. Not to say that the chain of events couldn't have happened, but that it was the worst thing that could happen. I didn't know how to express it, but it felt like there was an even worse conclusion waiting for me at the end of this tale. A conclusion I was averting my eyes from had its gaping mouth wide open and awaited me without mercy. Yes, the truth. The inconvenient truth was waiting for me. The path to it was the path I walked. If I want to turn back now is probably the time. Now, if I just kept my eyes closed for a little longer, if I looked away, if only I could hold on until tomorrow, it was unlikely that I would have to encounter the truth. Like always, I could continue being the Tsubasa Hanekawa I'd always been. Still Tsubasa Hanekawa, Araragi's best friend, still me. I could stay me. Nothing had to change. But, 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 but... I didn't know what Aragi was fighting this time. I knew that he had to be fighting something, though, together with Mayoi or maybe Miss Conbury. Probably with help from Shinobu, too. And as always with his life on the line. So I would fight, too. If it wasn't going to count as running away, then I wasn't going to look away either. This time I was going to face me. My heart that I'd cut loose, I had a feeling that this was such a tale. Yes, the tiger. That day, the day the new trimester began. I saw it on my way to school, a gigantic tiger. This all started when I first saw that tiger. That was the feeling I had. I wasn't certain, but I could tell that's what it was. I knew. The tyrannical tiger? Is that what Miss Ging called it? If I was going to approach it, that's where I would start.
I arrive at the library. I realize I'm bragging about my own town when I say this, but we have an extremely extensive library. It boasts a significant collection despite its size, and though I'm unsure whether it's due to a long-standing tendency or the librarian's tastes, its shelves focus on fanatically niche titles rather than bestsellers. It feels in some ways like a museum. As a side note, when Mr. Ashino was still here, I'd come to this library multiple times to borrow books on his request. He couldn't make a card since he wasn't a resident. Its only notable flaw is that it's closed on Sundays. But I've gone to this library ever since I was a child. I've never attended a cram school or taken lessons in anything, but you might say that all the things I needed in life I learned here. All the things my parents never taught me. I learned them here in this library, by myself. Lately I'd been using it a lot as a place to study with Aragi, but even when it was Miss Senjagahara's turn to be his tutor, I ended up visiting alone. To tell you the truth, I'd read most of the books in the collection by the time I was 15, but I liked the building's air, its atmosphere, and found myself coming here even when I didn't need to. It was a perfect spot for studying. While it may not have been home, it was at least a place where I felt at ease. But of course, I hadn't come here today when I didn't need to. I was about to do research.
Hello, Tsubasa, welcome. Hello there.
I greeted a familiar employee before grabbing about 5 volumes that I already had in mind and sitting down in a window-side seat that was practically my reserved spot. The full digitalization of collections that seems to be taking place all around wasn't being carried out here, which meant my only choice was to make my plodding way book by book. Although I'd read all of them before, it isn't as if my memory is perfect. More to the point, it couldn't be trusted on this issue. Because anything that's inconvenient to me, I can cut loose. I'm able to do so. To draw on how Mrs. Aragai put it, I'm able to look away from anything I want. I'd even forgotten all that happened over Golden Week, and I still couldn't remember it perfectly. No, I didn't want to remember. I was forcing my painful memories and heart-rending stress on someone else. I was forcing them onto Black Hanekawa, which is why my memories, my knowledge, and even my thoughts were of no use to me. If I still wanted to do something, if I wanted to struggle and flail to try to do something, I was going to have to go over and review everything like this, line by line, word by word, without looking away. I was going to have to read as if I was burning it all into my eyes.
But while I persisted until closing time, there was no book mentioning any aberration or supernatural creature that could be the tyrannical tiger, not only in those first 5 books, but in the 15 in-depth tomes on the subject that I ended up digging through. I was even careful to look for any creatures with a similar name, thinking that maybe I had misheard. Maybe it was the piratical tiger, for example, which can make sense given that it was manifesting itself through fires, but that was another swing. And amiss, I did find an aberration called the water tiger, but that was a kind of kappa, so it had to be unrelated. My intentions may have been good, but the results left much to be desired. I thought I would be able to start rattling off facts and citations at this point in the story like I was Mr. Ashino, but things don't always go that smoothly. Or was there actually some bit about the tiger? And had I failed to register it? The possibility that it was in those books, but that I had looked away not wanting to know. I wouldn't be able to trust anything if I started to say that. No, I couldn't trust anything from the start so long as I was me. The question was what to do given that situation, what I could try to do. If I couldn't trust anything, then there should be some way to use that unreliability to my advantage. I'd have to use the internet for my research if the library had nothing. But honestly, I wasn't very interested in taking that approach. While the internet is an incredible medium for tapping into what's happening at the moment, it's far too full of misinformation when it comes to researching info from the past. Frankly, it's a poor choice when it comes to aberration lore. Still, there was a chance it could at least provide me with a clue. I couldn't afford to have some silly antipathy toward electronic information since I had no other choice, and it was an approach, a method unavailable to Mr. Ashino with his inability to figure out technology. My phone was off because I was in the library, but I'd start searching once I got outside.
Having decided, I began placing each of the books I'd grabbed back in their original spots. I didn't know the extent to which my memory was accurate, but I seemed to remember at least where every book in the library went, so it was easy work.
Are you alone today, Tsubasa?
But as I did this, a different employee from the one who greeted me called to me. This one had seen me with Aragi multiple times, which explained the question. It seemed that some people thought that Aragi and I were a couple, and since he showed no signs of noticing this, I never went out of my way to correct them.
Yes, I'm by myself today.
I still came to the library alone quite often, as I mentioned, but maybe I wasn't conspicuous to this person during those times.
The library's about to close. Are you all done with your research?
I am. I'd come up empty but finished reading what I could.
Looks heavy. I wonder if that weight will be completely foreign to people once ebooks become the norm. No, actually, there won't be much use left for libraries at all once that happens.
Well, it's hard to say. I think you'll be quite all right so long as ebooks are little more than digital photos. This weight is part of what makes a book. Books aren't flat, they have volume. Figurine collectors didn't start saying they were good with photos just because digital cameras took off. A book isn't a book without a spine. Digitizing a book was the wrong way to think about it. Books and ebooks ought to be seen as different things, like a book and a video, not a shift, not an evolution, but a new breed.
I sure hope so. You're interested in ghosts?
Apparently uninterested in having any kind of deep discussion with a high school girl, the employee let out a little laugh, looked at the titles of the books I held, and asked in puzzlement. To be fair, none of the books were the kind that a girl in the flower of her youth would normally delve into, so I supposed I could understand the puzzlement. The more veteran employees knew about my tastes as a voracious reader, but this one was still new.
Yes, a bit it's for schoolwork.
I wasn't actually going to explain the whole situation, and chose a vague and nice-sounding answer to paper things over.
In that case, we have a book like that in the new read section. Did you look at that one?
No, not yet. Now that I thought about it, I hadn't checked out their new acquisitions.
I doubt there's any time left to read it now, but you can always borrow it.
Yes, I think I'll do that. I didn't get my hopes up. It would be far too convenient a twist for this last overlooked book to contain the info I needed about an aberration. But what did I have to lose? I followed the employee's suggestion and borrowed the book before leaving the library. Wait a second. A new read? New read, new breed? A thought suddenly came to me as I placed the book in my bag. No, it would be strange to say it came to me. After all, Miss Gain had told me from the beginning. An aberration that I was going to name. If I did all this research and couldn't come up with so much as a hint, if that tiger, like Black Hanekawa, is a new breed of aberration. Once I had a place to start, the rest fell into place. They were quite literally key words, and realizing this eliminated any need for a flashy display of references and quotations. In fact, I should have thought of it as soon as Miss Gain had spoken those words. Yes, there was no need to go to the library, because this was a saying found in any Japanese middle schooler's language textbook, an idiom that any Japanese person has heard at least once. Tyranny is fiercer than any tiger. A passage from the Tengong chapter in the Book of Rites. While it might not be necessary, allow me to recount the story in the way of a review. There was once a woman whose father-in-law and husband were devoured by a wicked, man-eating tiger, and later it even went on to eat her child. So then she was asked, "Why do not leave this place inhabited by a man-eating tiger?" Her answer, "No matter what fierce beasts may live here, it is better than living in a nation led by tyrants, tyranny in this case meaning a government focused on nothing but heavy taxation, conscription, and the like." So if Miss Gain is right, and I'm going to name this tiger the tyrannical tiger, the saying would have to be the origin of its name. I say this because when I first learned the words in elementary school, I felt like some part of me just couldn't agree. I had a strong feeling that it wasn't true. Any government had to be better than a man-eating tiger. That's what I thought. It wasn't because I was a child who didn't understand the text nuances. Her father-in-law and husband being eaten was one thing, but the issue I took with the story was the mindset of a woman, a mother, who'd impose such a philosophy even on her child. It was completely baffling to me. Of course, now that I knew there were vicious forms of government that were worse than tigers, I couldn't claim not to understand her at all. But somewhere inside of me, it was still hard to swallow. My theory is that this means the tyrannical tiger isn't just an abbreviation of tyranny is fiercer than any tiger, but rather A tiger that's not at least better than tyranny, or a tiger that transcends tigers, what do you think? On the other side of the phone, Nisenjo Gahara heard my hypothesis, paused for a bit, and disagreed.
I don't buy it. Part of me feels like she's leading you along. This Kane person, from the sound of it, you didn't name this thing. It was clearly her.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It was hard for me to explain that part. Words fell short of describing the temperament of this woman who called herself Mr. Ashino's senior, Izuko Gain. And in fact, even after seeing, meeting, and speaking to her directly, I didn't feel like I really understood her. No wonder I couldn't describe her, but there seemed to be no obvious reason for her to lead me along. For example, like the one Miss Senjugahara had when she manipulated the Fire Sisters. Miss Gain just pushed me away, saying she had nothing to do with it.
You don't know that, do you? She could have been lying. She could have had some indescribable reason. And by the way, that woman is probably Canberry's something.
What?
I want to say her mother's maiden name was Gain. I remember hearing it when I was in middle school. Kambaro herself said that her name used to be Suruga Gain. By the way, her mother's name was To. We can't know for sure until we ask the woman, but this feels a little too on the nose for them to be unrelated, or for it to be a coincidence, or for her to be just some distant relative.
Yeah, Suruga, To, and Izu, all three were names of all Japanese provinces. It would be stranger not to suspect that they were somehow related. The surname didn't seem that common either. In other words, Kambar said that she received that monkey's paw from her mom, so this Gain person seems fishy to me personally. Yeah, and I wouldn't say otherwise, of course. I truly meant that. Not because she was able to boss around episode, and not because of all the different things she got right about me. Dash, I know everything. It was that line. That line pierced me to my heart, like a thorn, like a stake.
Isn't Gain an old word for a firefighter? In that case, you can probably blame her for your house fire and the abandoned cram schools. You know, as in, it's the opposite.
Nope, nope. As in, it's the opposite. That wasn't a path we wanted to be going down. Speaking of which, Miss Senjogahara, were you able to contact Miss Kinbaro? She didn't know that the cram school had burned down until I told her earlier, but she had to be concerned about the well-being of her dear junior. She had all the time in the world on her hands while she was out with the flu, so I could imagine her trying to call.
Yes. But it didn't go through and went to her voicemail, which makes me think either her phone is off, or she's somewhere with no reception. And of course, I haven't heard anything from her. It's kids like those two who grow up to become college students who don't even go home over New Year's break.
Well, they're not going to have to do that much more growing up before that. What a raw, vivid prediction. Were they really going to leave home, though? Especially Araragi. I felt like his little sisters weren't going to let him. I could see them imprisoning him like in Misery if he said he was going to live in the dorms.
Still, Miss Hanekawa, I don't think anything too terrible is going to happen if Kanbura and Aragi were able to meet. But it also seems likely that Miss Gain's reason for coming to our town has something to do with Kanburi. In other words, Araragi and that half-vampire boy might meet again, then fight again. What is Araragi doing?
I had trouble figuring out a way to console her. I, of course, had my own thoughts about those two, but she seemed to be in a tougher spot given their relationships.
Well, it's fine. I hate giving up, but I'm good at waiting so as an adult woman. I'm going to do the mature thing and wait for him to return.
Whoa.
Because I can take it all out on him once he does.
What? Maybe she wasn't so mature after all? It seemed as though once Araragi and Miss Kanbar managed to escape the crisis they found themselves in, yet another would be in store for them.
But let's put that aside and focus on this problem. Going back to what we were talking about, they might be in a tough situation, but so are we. The tyrannical tiger, was it? For argument's sake, let's say we do the brave thing and decide to believe this Miss Gain. Personally, I'd associate tyrannical tiger with history. You know, like the past.
The past?
Yes, more so than if it's the piratical tiger, written with the character for fire, right? And you can also relate it to the idea of a trauma from the past.
Trauma. Transliterated into Japanese, it sounded like a pun on Tora, tiger, and Uma, horse.
Oh dear. I guess that sounded like just another play on words.
Typical, she said in an embarrassed tone. It seemed to me like she was usually unabashed about making those kinds of jokes, that she even loved them with all her being. But it sounded like she didn't want me to assume that one was on purpose. I did get what she was trying to say. History and tyranny.
We can't sit around just laughing it up. Let's put aside its name for now, and let's also put aside the question of whether or not it's a new breed. Doesn't this aberration pose a pretty realistic threat? What I mean is that its aims are pointed not inward like my crab or my oi snail, but outward, just like Kambari's left hand Bari's left hand.
What do you mean?
What do I mean? How could you possibly not see?
Miss Senjogahara sounded exasperated, but I really didn't see. What was she saying? I had only called her to sound out a third person about my name for this thing taught to me by Miss Gain. I know that structure is a little tangled. The tyrannical tiger and her reaction was fairly negative, which actually helped to calm me down.
Come on, Miss Hanekawa. There were cereal fires at your house, and then the abandoned cram school, okay?
Yes, right. Unfortunately, though, I don't have any proof at the moment linking that to my meeting with the tiger.
It doesn't matter if they're related or not. The only thing that matters is that in addition to the macro-sized long-term factor they share in common, which is that they were places you know very well, there's one very micro-sized, very short-term factor they also share, yes?
Huh? She'd said so much, but I still didn't get it. No, I probably did. I was just looking away from it. So you mean the fact that they caught on fire right after I saw the tiger on each...
It's not that, it's the fact that 2 places you had just slept in burned down in a row. In other words, unless we do something, aren't my apartment and Araji's home going to burn down tragically sometime around tonight?
She'd said it coolly, but she was right. There was no threat more realistic than this.
I'd called Miss Senjogahara while sitting on a park bench. It was actually the same park where Araragi met Melee for the first time. The thought also made me realize that it was where he and Miss Senjogahara decided to become boyfriend and girlfriend, giving it an even more important place in their hearts than the abandoned school building. To me, of course, it was nothing more than a regular park close to where I lived, and I felt no special attachment. Part of the route I'd always taken on my walks, it bore no particularly deep meaning as the source point of my call. Thinking I would go see the remains of the burned-down Hanekawa residence, I'd headed to this spot from the library, but filled with dread as I got close. I decided to call Miss Senjogahara first. It may have been more a way to avert my eyes than fear, but at this point, I was starting to lose any idea of what it meant to look away from things. I wasn't freaking out, but I was fretting. Indeed, Miss Senjogahara had pointed out something I wasn't expecting to hear, but even that, as she said, seemed like something I should have noticed without needing to be told. Seeing the Hanekawa residence as a place where I had just slept required a bit of an imaginative leap. The obviousness of sleeping at one's house makes it rather hard to define it as such. But I should have at least thought of the abandoned cram school as a place where I had stayed the night only yesterday. It burned down because I stayed the night there, even if I couldn't believe such a thing. One day later, and I might have died. That fear I should have felt. But I hadn't even come close, and it didn't seem like a lack of imagination so much as looking away, turning my back on reality. Maybe that was it. That was probably it. True. I couldn't unquestioningly agree with Miss Senjogahara's point. It wasn't a conclusion you could jump to, and there just wasn't enough data. You couldn't draw a logical conclusion based on a 2-building sample size. At the same time, that didn't mean I could wait for a 3rd and 4th sample. After my call with Miss Senjogahara, I prepared myself once more and headed out to the charred remains of my house, but where I expected something, I saw nothing. Once again, there was so little there it was stunning. Not a single rubbernecker now, it was a scorched field that looked like it could have been that way for the last 15 years. No police tape or fences cordoning it off like the scene of some crime. It was what you'd call an empty lot. There was nothing, I felt nothing. I had trouble readily believing even this feeling of feeling. Nothing, but it wasn't as if I had lived on the plot, I had lived in a house. I thought I could at least half believe the feeling. Yes, indeed, there was nothing here. I stayed there for only about a minute, since I might attract attention if I stood still for too long, and quickly moved along. Miss Senjogahara's fear seemed like a stretch even after I'd seen the scorched field. But it did bring to mind a relevant case, the story of Ashichi the grocer. Ashichi fell in love with a man whom she saw during a great fire, and to meet him again, she set her own fire to her home, a dreadful idea that chills the spine rather than warms the heart. Yet her passion seems of a piece with ordinary romantic love. Oshichi was born in Hinoima, the year of the fire horse, and women born under that zodiac sign have been said to be headstrong, which isn't even any aberration lore but just superstition, or rather, mere prejudice, because everyone alike has such feelings. It's a fortune that could apply to anyone. But in this case, the term ina-wa seemed to carry special meaning. Well, I knew it had no meaning. Uma, horse. Miss Senjogahara was embarrassed by how trauma sounded like a play on words, but puns seemed to form half of the basis of many a tale of an aberration. It certainly held true for Henuuma, about which they told that horses go mad when they see fire. Tiger and horse, Tora and Uma trauma, psychic wounds.
I could come up with lots of possibilities. I'm not at a conclusion yet. However, I did feel like one was on the horizon. The question was if I could face it even if it was a stretch, for example. The suggestion that Miss Senjogahara's apartment in Aragi's home might burn down was enough to make me fret. Right. It was time for me to settle this. This tale about fires, this tale about me. Pardon the intrusion. Aragi's home was far enough from the remains of the Hanekawa residence that I could have taken a bus, but I ended up walking back instead of using public transportation. I was able to enter without using the intercom because I'd been given a spare key. How trusting of them, but I still felt nervous. They could tell me to make myself at home, but I couldn't do that. What did they mean, make myself at home? I didn't know what it was to be at home. In fact, I didn't know myself. Of course, I shouldn't be returning to Araji's home if every place where I slept was going to go up in flames, but then it was also too late now that I'd spent a night there, in which case it was fine to come back. I'd established a strange kind of logic for myself. Still, my heart was so poor that I needed a logical reason just to go back to my bed for the night, and that made me want to die a little.
Welcome back, Tsubasa. You're late. Where'd you go?
Karen emerged from the living room to greet me as I took off my shoes. She'd welcomed me back, but it wasn't like I could announce that I was home. I was at a park in the area for a bit, just stopping by.
Have you heard anything from Araragi?
Nope, we haven't.
How prodigal does my brother think he can be? I'm kicking his ass once he gets back, as hard as I can.
Menaced Karen, showing me an actual kick. A too beautiful double-jumping kick. Even if he managed to get home safely after solving whatever case he was on, Aragi would be facing another predicament or two. No, I shouldn't be talking about it like it was someone else's problem. Nope, it made me really want to solve my own problem so that I could chew it. I wanted to be a predicament for him to come back to.
Whatever, forget about that forgettable brother of mine. I was waiting for you, Tsubasa. You could even say I was on edge waiting for you. Or maybe that I was on pins and needles. Or maybe that I was on pins and needles.
There's not much of a difference between those two phrases.
Suki's home too, so let's play a game or something. We already have cards lying ready on the living room table.
Cards? So she didn't mean a video game. I was somewhat surprised. Ah, I'm sorry, Karen. There's something I wanted to think about in Araraji's room.
Come on, it's fine.
As I tried to turn down Karen's invitation, she took my arm and started leading me into the living room. Ah, really?
They say it's better for people not to think about things, you know.
What? What kind of logic is that?
Logic, really? That stuff just makes your head hurt. I know they say that man is a thinking reed, but who decided it's wrong to be an unthinking reed?
What a bold opinion. But wasn't an unthinking reed just a plain reed? Was she all right with being a plain reed?
Come on, hurry up. You better not think you can put up a fight against me.
Hey. Okay, just let me get these off. I need to take my shoes off.
Hooray!
Karen threw up both arms. She was such an innocent girl. I really didn't have time to be enjoying card games when I had something that I didn't just want, but needed to think about, so no matter how forceful her invitation, perhaps I should have turned her down saying I didn't have the time. But I didn't, because I also knew full well how pointless it was to think about this alone. Not to agree with Karen's opinion about there being nothing wrong with an unthinking Reed. Of course, I didn't want to be a plain Reed. Yet I was just as unwilling to be either a thinking me or an unthinking me. I could think. I could think, and no matter what I came to realize, if that realization was inconvenient to me, I would just look away, pry it loose from my mind, forget it, and perhaps ultimately be unable even to think about it. So you could say what Miss Senjogahara had done for me earlier in order to grab onto clues in the context of an exchange. A dialogue was the smart way, while my better judgment told me I shouldn't involve Karen and Tsukihi middle schoolers. In this, I was already intruding on their lives. Weirdly, standing on ceremony would only be counterproductive, and above all, who better to talk to about fire than these girls? They were Subinoki Second Middle School's fire sisters, after all, a duo whose names both contained the character for fire.
Fire? What do I think of when I hear the word? Isn't it obvious? The blazing heart that resides in my chest.
Karen replied to my question with a somewhat dashing look. The certainty in her voice made me think she'd answered it often enough, quicker than I could have imagined. It was like she'd answered before I even asked.
So the short version would be passion.
I heard we'd be playing cards and expected poker, or blackjack, or sevens, or some other game like that. But to my surprise, Tsukihi proposed that we all build our own house of cards. The rules were that we would share 10 decks, and that whoever built the highest house the quickest would win. I'm sorry, but that's not fun. It was like playing with building blocks, only with most of the creativity removed. At the very least, it didn't seem like something to do in a group, but maybe that's what they call a generation gap speaking. Still, this was a designated time and place for the three of us to play cards. I couldn't phone it in, and I'd build triangles out of cards as I asked the two questions, disguised as small talk.
In that case, what do you think of when you hear the word flames?
Blazing passion that's even hotter? Justice. To put it in a word, justice.
I see. I nodded vaguely, uncertain to the point of contrast. At least it wasn't a definition that I could agree with given my current mental state. So is that why the two of you call yourselves the Fire Sisters?
That's right. The Fire Sisters, or in other words, the siblings of justice.
If we're being precise about this, she's completely wrong.
Karen's affirmation was blithely negated by Tsukihi, who sat next to her, negated with a smile. How merciless.
We called the Fire Sisters because both of us have the character for fire in our names. That's all. I feel bad for how plain the reason is, though. People have been calling us that since we were in elementary school, even before we began acting in the name of justice.
Really?
Her memory seemed to be cloudy. I knew that was probably the case, but I supposed it was better than if they had named themselves the way the Valhalla duo had.
By the way, I personally associate words like fire and flames with romantic love.
Love. Indeed. In fact, the story of Oshichi the Grocer referenced romantic love too, though it deviated a bit from the theme, and it was also common to speak of someone's burning love. Then I was distracted from the thought by how incredibly fast Tsukihi was building her house of cards. She was outstanding when it came to tasks that required precision. It seemed she possessed casually superb powers of concentration. I had actually been playing this fire-based word association game by myself all the way back from the park, but had come up empty-handed on my own. I'd only hit upon words that seemed to miss the mark, like red, or heat, or civilization. One person only being able to devise so many patterns a lack of imagination. It couldn't have been because of any such generic-sounding reason that I'd come up empty-handed. I was probably thinking in a way that intentionally avoided the word that would prove decisive. My thoughts were proceeding in a way that avoided any hints, so instead of continuing to deliberate further on my own, I transitioned to looking for an answer while playing with Karen and Tsukihi. But romantic love, huh? That was indeed something my mind wouldn't have associated with fire, not even while I was thinking of Oshichi's story. But as with justice, it wasn't hitting home. Somehow it felt off the mark.
You might not know, but the Fire Sisters don't just act in the name of justice, you see. We also give romantic advice.
You do? That was indeed something I was hearing for the first time. Araragi always emphasized how they were defenders of justice, so I'd assumed that was their main field of activity. Now that I thought about it, they were something like the faces of our local girls in middle school, which really is an impressive feat, and it actually seemed to make more sense for that to be their focus.
We've even given our big brother advice about his love life.
What? Aragi? Had they? Now, Alara guy was asking his little sisters for romantic advice? That was creepy.
Oh, yeah, I guess we did. Was it around May? I want to say he asks us something naive like what it meant to be in love.
So I guess that means he went to you too for advice about Miss Senjogahara? Putting aside how reliable Karen's memory was, that's what it had to be if it was in May. Those two first decided to go out on Mother's Day in the park I just visited, though at the time I'd mistakenly thought they were going out from before then. What was this unnatural feeling? Like I'd forgotten something, or rather, an easy feeling like my thoughts had forcefully shut down and I'd leapt straight to the most convenient conclusion I could find. Had I looked away again?
I wonder. It was a while ago, and I forgot what he was talking about. I don't even remember what we told him.
But her tone also made it feel more like she was glossing over something. In fact, unlike Karen, Sukihi seemed somehow suspicious about my line of questioning or mystified by it. Like she couldn't get a read. That made sense, of course, if someone who'd been left without a place to stay after a house fire started asking about what you associated with the word fire, you didn't have to be the strategist to find it unnatural.
Anger also seems like a fire word, but that connects to what Karen said about justice. For her, justice is anger.
That's right.
So vigorously that her house of cards crumbled, though she was only up to a second floor. Talk about flushing your progress down the drain.
In other words, anger equals flames, and flames equal justice.
I guess, in either case, you could say that Karen and I are thinking about heated emotions.
Heated emotions. Then again, phrases like frozen justice and cold feelings of romance almost felt like you were talking about a sewing machine on an operating table. So Sukihi's words made at least more sense than Karen's. But were there any heated emotions in me? Heated hot heat? No. It felt off in some way.
Actually, wait, Tsukihi, what do you mean? If anything equals justice, it's heated emotions.
The older sister seemed to have the stronger attachment of the two to justice. I understood that it was Sukihi, the younger sister who was normally more passionate about their work. But to me, it looked like she was just going along with what Karen did. It was an easy arrangement to understand, though. The big sister having an influence on her little sister, but having no siblings, it was also difficult for me to understand the easily understood relationship.
Yes, you're right. Still, Karen, your feelings for Mizudori and justice. But they're still heated, aren't they?
I guess. Sorry, I was wrong.
How abnormally straightforward. She was so amenable that I could understand Araragi's concern. Of course, someone like her would be deceived at will by someone like Mr. Kaiki. Wait, but who was Mizudori?
Karen's boyfriend? By the way, my boyfriend's name is Rosakuzawa.
Huh? What? Both of you have boyfriends? Araragi never told me.
Oh, yeah. That's because he likes to act like they don't exist.
Concise and easy to understand. Too easy, in fact. If you wanted to say it was something Araji would do, it was... Because at the end of the day, he doted on his little sisters. I could feel it in every word he spoke about them. And there was also his explosive rage when Mr. Kaiki duped Karen. Really, what a big brother. So, out of curiosity, what's he like? Although it didn't feel like digging into the subject would help with my current problem, I asked anyway, simply interested in the Fire Sisters' boyfriends. But then came their answers.
Guys like my big brother.
Someone similar to my big brother.
I regretted having asked. These siblings. However, if what they were saying was true, maybe I couldn't blame Aragi for wanting to pretend they didn't exist. He'd be tormented by his hatred for people who were like him. The same had be true for his dim view of the Fire Sisters' activities, and you could even call it self-hatred. Yes, he fought while lost while feeling regret.
I don't know what to do with him. I want to get his seal of approval somehow, but he won't even meet Mizudori or Rosakuzawa. He can be small when it comes to that kind of thing.
You're right, but then he has the nerve to introduce us to Miss Senjo the Hera. The nerve!
That's cute, though. At the end of the day, it's just that Aragi feels like his two cute little sisters were taken from him, and that's making him envy those guys, right? Like he's burning up inside with jealousy. Gulp. My own words made me gulp in shock. Burning up with jealousy? Burning? Envy. Yes. That was another keyword so clearly related to fire that it should have been one of the first things to come to mind. Burning envy. Even if our Aragi was doing it as a joke, the fact that their boyfriends didn't exist to him was equivalent to looking away from the truth. Just like with me, it was the one way we were the same. Looking away, turning away from reality. And the cause was one of the most powerful human emotions, one of the 7 deadly sins, even in V, heated emotions consuming envy. Thus I was burning with jealousy. My hands, shaking from the truth thrust before me so abruptly that I didn't have the time to turn away, brought my fresh house of cards crashing down. I'm sure there isn't a single person in modern-day society who hasn't thought of how great it would be if the human brain worked like a hard drive. When I say that, I mean the ability to immediately erase any memories, records that we want to forget as if they never happened. To overwrite any elements of reality that we want to avert our eyes from, and to never have to be brought down after suddenly recalling our traumas and fears. How wonderful would it be if you had such a brain? And howsoever it came to be, that wonder seemed to be mine, cutting a memory loose from the mind. To take the most recent example, my morning conversation with Episode on the way to school was a good illustration. Being me, in my own way recalled what happened over spring break and felt like I was speaking to him in fear, but any observer would have seen my actions as utterly bizarre. I was having a nice chat with someone who had tried to kill me. How abnormal can you get? I was merely taken aback by how much of a normal conversation we were having. No, it might be one thing if we were characters in a manga or drama, but how could I do something that frighteningly eccentric as an actual human being? There was something clearly abnormal about it. The only person who didn't notice was the person doing it. So I'd forgotten. While I naturally had forgotten the moment that my organs were sent flying, I thought the shock had caused those memories to disappear, but that wasn't it. I'd also forgotten the fear, the terror I must have felt for him. My body remembered, but my mind had forgotten. No, I'd go so far as to say that even my body had forgotten. Which is why I was able to carry on with a healthy life even after that happened to me. I didn't live each day tormented by regret like Aragi. I didn't know when it started. I didn't know when I first learned to act like some kind of computer. Judging from my current state, though, it was from before I became Tsubasa Hanekawa. It only made sense if I could do so unconsciously even before I was old enough to be myself. I had no idea why I was able to acquire this supremely convenient ability that put an aberration to shame. This thing you could call a kind of skill. I had a feeling that the memory of whatever caused it was the very first thing So then I'd been something of an aberration prior to my encounter with the aberration known as the afflicting cat. More than anyone else, I was close to being a monster, and at long last I began to feel the weight of Mr. Ashino's remark that aberrations are nothing more than triggers. No, maybe there was no afflicting cat at all. Maybe Black Hanekawa was always inside me. Or possibly the tyrannical. Just as the way the past always follows our lives, no matter how much we feel like we forgot it, how much we pretend it never happened. Maybe it haunts us. Maybe it never ends. Mr. Ashino had set a bar at 20 years old, but even that seemed unreliable to me at least. So long as I wanted it that way. So long as I continued to be me. Forever? Maybe I could continue to be me forever. Just as Sherlock Holmes was forced to take the stage after he retired, not even allowed to die like he continued. Maybe I would continue. I probably would continue. But this was it. I was going to end it. I had to end it. I was at my limit. If anything, having been able to do it for all this time, 15 years, maybe 18 years, was bizarre. Fooling myself so I could go on? What was truly bizarre was being able to make such an absurd thing work for all this time. The only possible endpoint was bankruptcy. I couldn't paper over it any longer. I hadn't reached a limit. This was a terminus.
I continued to work on making a house of cards with the Araragi sisters. Tsukihi was the winner all the way. I'd make it pretty far but could never finish my tower. So, Miss Hanekawa, there are things you can't do, Tsukihi remarked. Had dinner together with Araragi's parents after they got back from work and shut myself in Araragi's second-floor room, alone. It was only day 2, but I already felt oddly used to the room. It must have been because it was Araragi's. So first, in a show of bad manners, I collapsed on the bed with my uniform on and buried my face in a pillow.
We may never be able to meet again, Aragi. But there was nothing I could do about that. Because if my reasoning was correct, and it was correct, the tyrannical tiger presented itself in this town precisely because Araragi was absent. I continued to roll around on the bed for another 5 minutes or so. Not for no reason. There was a reason. In animal terms, this was marking behavior, me leaving behind traces of myself on Aragi's bed. The traces I didn't want to leave behind at the Hanekawa residence, I was trying to leave them behind here in Araragi's room. Knowing him, he would notice. Even if we never met again, some small part of him would probably remember me whenever he slept in this bed, and I would content myself with that. I'd be satisfied. Self-satisfied. If my reasoning was correct, and if everything I was about to do went well, then no, I didn't think I would ever be able to meet Araragi again. If he got back safely and I was able to be there, waiting for his return, that me would no longer be the me that he knew. Episode had said the current me, and the spring break me seemed like different people, and this would be even more dramatic. Aragi would meet a me that was practically a different person. Because confronting my past, because defeating this tiger meant that. Okay, that's enough. By the end, I wasn't sure if I was leaving behind my scent or smelling Araragi's, but I finally decided to make my move around 7:30. Uh-oh. I need to hurry a bit. I rolled around too much. Of course, since the Hanekawa residence had burned down in the afternoon, there didn't seem to be much proof that the tiger was nocturnal like the cat, but it was still a point of reference. I started by taking off my uniform and putting it on hangers. After that, rummaging through a clothes case for some of Araragi's casual wear that looked relatively easy to move around in, I wore those. Pajamas were one thing, but I did have a few qualms about borrowing regular clothes without permission. Araragi, however, was the one who always wanted to see me in something other than my school uniform, so I hoped this would in fact be a dream come true. A mischievous thought even popped into my head, and I considered taking a picture of myself and sending it to Araragi, though I still had no idea what kind of situation he was in. It might annoy him, so I decided not to contact him, but when I thought about it, that was a convenient excuse. Me acting like I was being a sensible person, I'd have immediately tried to get in touch with him like Miss Sanjo Gahara. If I was really worried, wasn't that the human thing to do? In that case, I'd be shameless. I'd send him a pic to cheer him on. I felt like I was still able to encourage him. I took my cell phone out of the pocket of my now hanging uniform, then held out my arm and snapped a photo of myself. I am a high school girl, so I'd been using a cell phone for a decently long amount of time. But it was my first time taking a selfie. I messed up a few times, but quickly got the hang of it and managed to take a pretty good picture, if I do say so myself. I attached the image to an email and sent it to Araragi, without adding a word of text, then turned my phone off. The next time it was on, I'd no longer be of this world, so it was closer to harassment than an innocent prank. It was like I'd sent in a funeral portrait. It was like bullying by a girl who'd always been called a model student. A horrible thing to do, if I do say so myself. Now there was nothing in my heart I would regret not having done. There was nothing of my heart I would regret not leaving behind. With a lightened heart, I could start getting ready. I took a notebook and a pencil from my bag, sat in the chair, and faced our Aragi's study desk. I wasn't reviewing my lessons for the day or preparing for tomorrow, though. Yes, I was going to write a letter. A proper letter. I didn't know how to begin it at first, but then realized there was no point in being awkwardly formal. So I began with a regular opening line. Dear Miss Black Hanekawa, maybe it wasn't anything that I actually needed to do. Maybe I was wasting my time. Because while I had no memories as Black Hanekawa would have memories as me. Still, I wanted to express how I felt, and I wanted to do it as me, speaking to the now independent me who wasn't me, to her. In my place, she had taken on the burden of every dark part of me, every black part of me, and I wanted to convey to her my feelings of gratitude and my final request. Then, dear Miss Black Hanekawa, it's nice to meet you. Well, I guess that's a strange thing to say. But this is Tsubasa Hanekawa. Allow me to start by thanking you. Thank you for all of the backbreaking work you did in my place, both during Golden Week and before the Culture Festival. I imagine that I've been forcing a lot of hardship on you this time, too. I'm truly sorry for causing you nothing but trouble. It's now finally begun to strike me how it may have been my ego that I buried you when you were there on the street that day, run over. My actions that day saddled me with a responsibility towards you that I doubt I am able to fully repay. Maybe that's the kind of thing that Mr. Oshino really meant by that line he used so much. People just go and get saved on their own. Because if you're not thinking about whether you're ready to take on the connections, or honestly the responsibilities that arise, you're going to have to get through the rest of your life relying on nothing more than one stopgap measure after the next. Just as Shinobu was bound to Aragi because he saved her, I've shackled you as Black Hanekawa to me. And on top of that, I barely let the fact bother me. Unlike our Aragi, I was living a carefree, peaceful life. How sinful can one be? And so I'm really not in a position where I can ask this of you, but I fear that I might end up hurting a very important friend if I don't do something. I have no choice but to rely on you. I have no one else I can rely on. So I'm going to say it to someone for the first time in my life. Save me, please. I'll never bother you again, and I'll make sure you're never alone. Please, I beg of you. I know that you probably have to do as I say in order to protect me, and that saying this may not change a thing, but it is a sincere request. I'm going to write down a few things I know about this situation, in case they can be of help. I know that you share my memories, but it seems that you have been completely severed from me this time. I have an idea why for that too, which I'll explain later. So I think it would be easier for you to understand if you read this in a letter. Unlike your memory, mine is full of holes, so while I can't be sure of anything, this is probably the truth. I don't know everything. I only know what I know. I've used those words with Aragi as a kind of excuse, but allow me to say them to you too. I'm going to tell you everything I know. So first, and while I think this goes without saying because it's something you as an aberration know quite well without being told, the true identity of that gigantic tiger, the tyrannical tiger, is that it is a new breed of aberration, born from my heart, just like you. Or to be even more precise, a new kind of aberration that my heart cut loose. This I can state as a fact, but one major point of difference between the two of you is that while you're based on an old aberration known as the afflicting cat, the tyrannical tiger has no base, nothing to which its spirit is bound. If I had to say it was based on anything, it's you. The tyrannical tiger is a tiger because you were a cat. A more primordial creature, a more primordial organism, a fiercer beast, and that is why after you a cat, I came up with a tiger. I guess you could call it a successor? I should have realized it earlier, but I think that in these past few months I'd gotten too used to aberrations, including you. Knowing of aberrations draws one to aberrations. That's something Mr. Oshino said. Just as Araji became familiar with how to use his own immortality ever since spring break, I must have become used to prying loose pieces of my own heart as aberrations ever since Golden Week. Like someone first starting to put in contact lenses or something, we can get accustomed to anything and the result of all my proficiency. is the tyrannical tiger. I think the differences between you during Golden Week, you before the Culture Festival, and you this time aren't individual traits so much as a manifestation of this proficiency. The fact that you appear only when I go to sleep, reduce my level of stress while I'm asleep, then turn back into me when I wake up without any need for Mr. Oshino, Aragi, or Shinobu to deal with you, makes you far too convenient an aberration, far too much of a blessing. Then again, of course that's how it is, because you're an aberration brought forth by me for my own sake. You're going to be convenient, naturally, and while you may have already noticed this too, though I had it wrong at first, I think you're here. I think I refused to learn my lesson, and summoned you again so that I could do more than just relieve the stress of that house burning down. Yes, it had to be thanks to you that Miss Kambaru saw me and thought that I wasn't feeling down the way she thought I'd be, but that's all incidental. The fire itself had nothing to do with it. The cause of the fire was the cause. I'm sorry that I have to say this like it doesn't involve me, but this is something that happened unconsciously. Or, actually, I don't have any memory of it at all. But I think I must have relied on you as a way to fight.
Monogatari series by Nisio Izan, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website, artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story.
Against the tyrannical tiger I saw that day, just like I'd always been relying on you, even long before my life was ever affected by the afflicting cat. And I relied on you again. I know that modern medicine has a negative view on the condition popularly known as a split personality, more technically known as dissociative identity disorder, and I'm not a proponent of it either. But while the expression may not be correct, it would have to be the most understandable way to express who I am. Aragi once told me that I was scary. Mr. Oshino once told me that it was creepy the way I acted like a saint. But to tell you how I honestly felt when I heard them say those things, I had no clue what they meant. I felt like there was never a time I was being anything less than my natural self. Araragi would say that I was forcing myself to be a regular girl, that I was trying to be too ethical. And yes, that line of reasoning must have been pretty close to the truth, but it didn't serve as a reason why I was able to do something so outrageous. It's not something you could simply will yourself to do. So then why was I? It's simple. Because I'd looked away from any inconvenient reality ever since I was a child, constantly setting loose pieces of my heart. Miss Senjo Bahara described this as being dull when it comes to darkness the day before yesterday, and she was exactly right. In fact, I don't look at the darkness at all. I've averted my eyes from malice and misfortune, not as any kind of self-defense. If anything, I think it was self-sacrifice. I'd sever the parts of myself that were inconvenient to me in order to keep being me. Like how I wasn't able to see that house from the classroom. If there was ever anything I didn't like, I would say it had nothing to do with me and cut it off. No matter what horrible things happened to me, I would say they had nothing to do with me and cut them off. So there was no way for my personality to become twisted. There was no way for me to get bent over. I couldn't even stop being naive about the world. Twistedness of that sort is something that any human needs in order to live, and I just skipped all of that. Of course you'd feel scared. Of course you'd be creeped out. I know I rebutted Aragi by saying that he was going too far when he talked about miracles, but the way I am is the result of something more atrocious and blood-drenched than any miracle. I understand that the most difficult step of the counseling process for children who were never loved by their parents, which is to say children who grew up abused, is getting them to recognize that they've suffered abuse, how terribly they've been tyrannized. It's no small feat to accept that you aren't loved by your parents. In most cases, children act like the abuse itself never happened. This shows itself in many ways, whether it's a twisted interpretation of the facts or pretending that it didn't happen at all. But one thing that all of these methods share in common is that they look away from reality. So let me admit it now, I grew up abused by my parents. Every single parent I ever had treated me abusively. I have never once been loved. I have never for a moment been loved, but I never recognized that. I ignored my pain, saying that this kind of thing must happen in every home to some degree or another. I could be struck in the face, but I never thought that was abuse. I couldn't think it was. I set that stress loose before I knew it, in the form of a cat, and pretended that it never happened. Of course, if you want to talk about what abuse really is, it's a very easy thing to understand and also a very hard thing. Abuse can assume forms other than violence. As an extreme example, no. Even this is still within the bounds of general opinion. Abuse can exist in the form of spoiling a child. Abuse that's called education. Abuse that's called discipline. Abuse that's called an upbringing. Abuse that's called a parent-child relationship. One can ultimately make a case for the view that abuse is anything a parent does to a child, and maybe we should listen to that case instead of rejecting it out of hand. Parts of it may bear merit depending on the way it's made. You wouldn't argue that it isn't abuse if the person in question is all right with what's happening to them. So while it's a vague conclusion, you simply have to judge every case as a whole. Which is why I can make this assertion. I can look away and say all day long that I wasn't abused. I wasn't tyrannized. I wasn't neglected. I have no such recollection. They did the bare minimum as parents. No, you couldn't even argue that in bad faith. They only ever did the minimum as parents. They only ever did the worst they could do. That's how I should have thought about it. They'd abused me in the most heinous way. By not loving me, I'm sure they had their excuses. But what did those kinds of excuses have to do with their child? A parent's love for a child isn't a duty to be fulfilled. It's a feeling, and you shouldn't get married or have children if you aren't capable of feeling it. If you never had to feel pain or no sadness, then you'd be free of stress and always perform well, whether in school or in athletics, whether it's ethics or morals. If you never had to feel the pressure of failing or anxiety over meeting a terrible fate, if you could ignore all pain, whether physical or mental, you could be perfect all around. That is the truth of Tsubasa Hanekawa, model student. The boring answer to why I have been me. I could ignore the taste of blandness. How unfair could it get, right? I was tossing the darkness and suffering that every person is burdened with onto someone else's shoulders. I bet Miss Senjogahara would be furious if she heard that. When I think of her 2 years of suffering, when I think of her 2-year fight to in fact acquire her pain, and then look at myself in the way I put it all on you, never having to know suffering, never having to feel pain, never having to fight, frustrating doesn't begin to cover it. And while it's very interesting that the form known as Black Hanekawa would be created by a person like myself getting involved with an aberration called the afflicting cat, aberrations are nothing more than triggers, as I said earlier. You are you. Of course, this third edition of you is more powerful than the last two, and you seem to be severed from me. As I said earlier, I'm getting better at this the more I do it. When I asked Tsukihiko what the trick was to making a house of cards, she told me this kind of thing is just about practice. It's not about technique, it's how many times you've tried. I'm sure you'd be good at it if you did it 20 times, and the same goes for everything. So I must have uncoupled you from my heart better than I did my first and second times. I made you into your own personality. Call it nonsense if you want, it's a terrible story. No, it's more terrible than a terrible story. After all, like I've been saying, you're not the only thing I cut loose from my heart as an independent aberration this time. Should I call it another one? Or should I call it another breed? I unleashed the tyrannical tiger before I let you loose. If you are an avatar of my stress, then the tyrannical tiger is an avatar of my envy. Just as I wouldn't have come upon the idea of a new breed of aberration if I hadn't talked to that library employee, I never would have come upon that keyword had I not talked to Karen and Suki. But now that I have, it seems so fitting it feels like the only possible word for it. Envy. To be honest though, I really had no association with this word, envy, until just 2 days ago. I didn't even need to cut it loose. I'd never envied anyone. Because I was a disgustingly good model student able to ambitiously tackle any problem without feeling any stress at all. I never felt like I begrudged others. If anything, what I did feel was something like dissatisfaction. Why doesn't everyone try harder? Or they should all just do more. The feeling had been enough to make Araragi mad at me, and now I realized just how self-absorbed I was. Unlike me, everyone else had to battle their stress as they lived their lives. He didn't need that from a cheater like me. You can do anything if you try hard enough. I'd been able to do anything without trying precisely because I wasn't trying, and I must have been looking away from even Araragi's feelings as I uttered those words to him. Which is why I never needed to have anything to do with envy. No, I wouldn't say that envy and I were completely unacquainted, but the amount of envy I had felt that had built up in me must have been far less than any regular person's. The total envy I had cut loose from my heart was a minimal amount, but it crossed a threshold all at once 3 days ago. I remember now. That day, the first day of the new term. Just like any other day, I was awakened by an automatic vacuum cleaner. I washed my face. I made myself presentable. I headed to the dining room for breakfast. And what I saw there were the persons who should be called my father and my mother already having breakfast. The sight struck me as a normal one, and I began to make my own meal. But that only means that I immediately severed it from my memory, that I rewrote my memory, because I saw it, clear as day. He and she were having the same thing for breakfast. The three of us lived in the same house, but separately. That's how it was supposed to be. But for whatever reason, one of the two had made breakfast for the both of them, and they were eating together. When I recall it now, yes, I selected my own cookware to make breakfast that morning, which was a strange thing to be doing. After all, there should have been no need for me to select any cookware because I was the last person to enter the kitchen. The other two would have used the other two sets. In other words, it meant that one of them had made food for two for the other's sake. It could only mean that they were having breakfast together and leaving me out. That's what made me jealous. I felt a clear sense of envy. I realize this is a ridiculous thing to say. These were two parents who abused me, two persons who lived in the same house as me, but could never be called my family, and you'd wonder why I should ever care what they did, whether that meant eating together or anything else. But it's not about logic, and this illogic also explains why I began to feel so averse to the idea of us staying the night at a hotel as an emergency measure after the Hanekawa residence burned down. I didn't want to be isolated in a cramped room. Maybe if we were one and one and one and... But I didn't want it to be 2 and 1. It's not that I wanted us to be 3. I didn't want it to be 2 and 1. I didn't want to see that. Even if it meant sleeping outdoors, I wanted to look away. My oh-so-kind hope that those two would use the fire as an opportunity to begin reconciling was basically nothing but the flip side of these emotions. There was practically something wrong with me? No, there was absolutely something wrong with me. I was scary, creepy, and foolish. I was unable to notice my own feelings, and when I did, I let them loose, only wishing that the two would get even closer and reconcile. In fact, you couldn't call my heart a human's. You'd have to call it an aberration's. My true, honest feelings were the result of looking away toward the flip side. I was the reason that their relationship had cooled off, of course, and since I would be leaving Japan in half a year, it wouldn't be odd if they began treating each other differently. This was a couple who had become husband and wife because of a connection they felt existed between them. Or maybe another non-aberrational trigger for the change was the time they had spent in the hospital together during Golden Week. In that case, I was envious of their relationship despite all of this evidence pointing to me being the cause. It didn't stand to reason. So like I said, it wasn't logical. I was thinking about how much they should just separate. Yet, I was also hoping that the embers between them would reignite. But I didn't want to see the two of them getting along. Whatever the case, I was jealous of their reconciliation. I was envious to the bottom of my heart that they were now trying to become a family again after all this time. I was burning with envy. That was enough for my envy to cross the threshold and give birth to the tyrannical tiger. I gave birth to a tiger at the beginning of the new term, just as I gave birth to you during Golden Week. If I was able to create a completely original new breed of aberration this time without relying on a base like an afflicting cat, this must be another talent I'll only hone with practice. You could say that I was attached to the saying tyranny is fiercer than any tiger, but I also feel that Miss Senjogahara was somewhat right, and I was led to the name by Miss Gain. And one more thing on that subject. My guess is that the tyrannical tiger never would have been born if I hadn't met Mayoi on the way to school that day. The tiger was born because my conversation with Mayoi let me know that Aragi's whereabouts were unknown, which is to say that she let me know that he wouldn't be able to exercise the tyrannical tiger the way he'd done to you during your last 2 appearances. Aragi must have been acting as the brakes on my heart. I'd been more excited to meet him in class that first day than I knew. It was a case of terrible timing. But I know for a fact this is why that tiger appeared right after I met Mayoi. The responsibility is all mine in the end. The tyrannical tiger is a monstrous animal that took form because of how fragile my heart is, the all-consuming flames of envy. It was, of course, envy toward my parents that caused the Hanekawa residence to be engulfed in flames, and it was envy that caused the abandoned cram school to burn, too. my feelings toward Miss Kanbara, the only person Aragi had asked for help. I was angry at Aragi then, at least. I thought I was, but in reality, I think I was intensely envious of Miss Kanbari, the way I was of Miss Senjogahara. That's how it should be. I had learned of the emotion that was envy, and it suited me very well, but it must not have been long before I cut that envy loose from myself and transferred it to the tyrannical tiger. My envy already had a convenient escape route. Earlier, I described the tyrannical tiger as an aberration that is independent, just like you, but autonomy might be a better word. Because unlike you who are bound to my flesh, the tyrannical tiger is able to move and act freely. And as a result, the abandoned cram school, which had a place in all our hearts, burned down. Miss Senjogahara's line of reasoning that said any building I slept in would immediately catch on fire was wrong in the end, but the tyrannical tiger has what you might call a unique trait that makes her theory look like an attractive alternative. Because you see, that tiger burns down everything I envy. Both Miss Senjogahara's apartment and Araragi's home could easily go up in flames at any moment. Not because I stayed the night, but because I was envious of them. I saw the unshakable bond between father and daughter at the Senjogahara's and got that rare inside view of the Araragi family built on its solid foundation of trust. I've forgotten it by now, but how could I not feel envy as someone who's never known home or family? I wish I could curse myself to death for the way I'd looked away from that envy and forced it onto the tyrannical tiger and so optimistically thought about how great it was to feel included in a family. But it seems my curses are only pointed outwards. If I can say there's any saving grace here, I suppose it would be that the tyrannical tiger's fires are limited to buildings and that it isn't an aberration that burns humans, similar to the way you acted during Golden Week. It seems that one of my firm values is that you should not kill humans. I say that because I think I know just how much Araragi suffered over spring break caught between human lives and saving lives. No, that's not it. I'm whitewashing it when I say that. No part of me during Golden Week was bothering to look at others, at victims including my parents. I did nothing but look away and was desperately working to do nothing but dispel my stress. Life was secondary, in fact. I tried to kill Aragai at the end. I was self-centered and nothing more. That goes for this time, too. What I'm truly jealous of, truly envious of, must be places, not people. Places to live. Which is why you can say it's dwellings that I've been targeting and not just any building. Places where people live with others. I burned down the Hanekawa residence and the abandoned cram school because I was someone who didn't even have a room and slept in the hallway. I created that tiger. I want a place where I belong. And I'm jealous of people who act like it's natural for them to have those kinds of places. That's why I burn homes over humans. It took all of it on, my destructive impulses of wanting that house to just disappear, my envy that transcended jealousy, and set it all ablaze. Feelings ablaze! Yes, I offhandedly asserted that I have the same kind of destructive impulses as everyone else, that I wished for that house to just disappear, but the same kind of feelings as everyone else? I hadn't even known what it feels like, how painful it is to feel like everyone else. I'd taken that insipid, destructive impulse that had already been cut loose and detached from myself to be the way I felt, and convinced myself that I was normal. It was like I was overprotective of myself. It was like I was abusing my... Yes, that's right. I was abused most of all by myself. I've been killing myself all this time. While I think this self-analysis is correct, that isn't to say there's no risk at all of anyone getting burned, like it went during Golden Week. Both the Hanekawa residence and the abandoned cram school just so happened to be empty when they went up in flames. If anyone was inside, I'm sure they would have suffered the same fate. If Araragi or Miss Kambaru happened to be in the building when the tyrannical tiger was invoked. The thought sends a chill down my spine. And this thought could still become a reality with Miss Senjogahara's apartment or Araragi's home. The relationship between Miss Senjogahara and her dad, the relationship between the Araragi sisters and Araragi. I can't say I'm not jealous. I bet it's a lie that I've never known envy. I've begrudged every person I've ever been jealous of. I wanted a dad like that. I wanted little sisters like them to wake me up every morning. Those feelings turn into flames. I think we can say it was a very good move on my part to have never slept over at friends' homes until now. Well, maybe we should call that another thing I was unconsciously avoiding. No. If the tyrannical tiger got better at what it did, if it set fire after fire and grew proficient, then forget sleeping over at one home after the next. Every house in the world could very well burst into flames. Schools, libraries, parks. I could see them all burning too. That's how it was for me. That's how jealous I was of warm homes. Jealous enough to want to take that warmth and burn it to a crisp. To be honest with you, I don't know what kind of values you, which is to say the aberration known as Black Hanekawa, have. We may share memories and knowledge. You may be able to face even the things I once looked away from, but it seems like we have completely different personalities. What would be the point in having a split personality otherwise? So I'm also unsure of how you feel about this tyrannical tiger's presence or about my line of reasoning. Maybe you think things are fine the way they are, and I think that would be correct from an aberration's point of view. Maybe you would tell me that there's nothing to be worried about because while arson may be a grave crime, this isn't the kind of thing that can be judged by the law. Yes, that's one opinion. And I won't lie. Part of me wants to be comforted by those words. But I just want to put an end to this. I'd be cutting loose a piece of my heart every time something happens, endlessly creating one aberration after another, offloading any responsibility to elsewhere, and forcing others to meet terrible fates while being completely unaware of any of it. Living a happy and carefree life. Could there be any worse nightmare? I've torn so many people to shreds since Golden Week, spread so much damage, and been ignorant of it all. Like I was pinching my cheeks, but they didn't hurt. Can't you say that's the life I've been living? It's not as if I want to be a good person or a virtuous person. Being moral or ethical doesn't mean anything if you have to use something else to get you there. You. Or the tyrannical tiger. I don't want to live if it means stepping on others. Even if we resolve this issue with the tyrannical tiger, I'm just going to give birth to a lion or something next time. And then maybe a leopard after that, over and over, right? I can imagine all of you saying that you don't mind, it's what you were created for, and that's why I've made my decision. I've made a decision in my heart. This thing's so whittled down that nothing is left, even its core. I'm putting an end to all of this. No. I'm going to begin at last. I'm going to stop looking away and point my eyes straight forward. Not only at the tyrannical tiger, but at you too. I'm opening the eyes I've kept closed. Sleeping Beauty has slept for 18 years now, and she needs to wake up. So please, Miss Black Hanekawa, I want you to return. I want you to go back inside my heart. I want you and the tyrannical tiger to come home. Please, I'm begging you. My heart is your home. I won't leave you to be on your own, so please don't leave me on my own. If Mr. Oshino is right, when I turn 20, or maybe even before that, you and the tyrannical tiger too might disappear. My girlish adolescent fantasies might die off and disappear once I become an adult. Even now, you must be something like an echo. So eventually, I'm sure you'll vanish and disappear. I'm sure that's the way it's supposed to be. But please, that's why I'm asking you. Please don't vanish. Please don't disappear. Please, come home. Let's stop living apart. I know there's not much space in my heart, but let's live as a family, colliding and crashing into one another inside of it. I won't ever tell you again to just go to sleep if you're feeling sleepy. I swear to you now that I'll love it all. My stress and my envy, my anxiety and my suffering, the bad possibilities and the deep darkness. I know it's a shameless request, but I've decided to live shamelessly. I sure Araragi is going to be disappointed. What he values in me is what Miss Senjogahara would call my pure whiteness, my deficiencies as a creature. To be honest, that's the one thing that I can't do. I don't want to disappoint Aragi. In the end, I never once told him that I love him. I was the only party to our love from beginning to end. It was frankly strange to me that I was so attracted to him when we'd never even spoken until spring break, that I still pined for him like this and refused to let him go. But now I finally understand. No one that I know confronts his own weakness as much as he does, and I find him dazzling, almost blindingly dazzling. I can think back with fondness to that night when Miss Senjogahara and I excitably badmouthed at Araragi, and while I think Miss Senjogahara feels the same way, Every insult I uttered about Aragi somehow became praise, like calling him a chump. Everything I said came out sounding like that. All of my anger for him was nothing more than fondness, and at face value, too. My feelings for him were the one thing I couldn't cut loose. I've always loved Araragi, always, even when I become you. He says he saved the dying Shinobu even as he cried about not wanting to die. I bet I would have been smiling as I saved her. Yes, I think that if you were to pinpoint the moment when I fell in love with him, it would have to be when he was crying in that battle to the death with Shinobu. After all, I've never cried before. Not a single time. I doubt I even cried when I was born. That's why I fell in love with Aragi the crybaby. Episode said that I had become normal. But the bigger question is, what if I stopped being me? If I became me, would Aragi cry yet again? I wouldn't be able to stand it. But I'm not going to look away anymore from whatever it is that I can't stand. I want to become one with the two of you, never looking away from the reality that doing so would disappoint Araragi, so that I can keep loving Aragi too. That's what I want to do. Miss Black Hanekawa. No, that's such a formal thing to call you now that I think about it. The me inside of me. Or maybe I should call you another me. No, that somehow seems wrong, too. I have a feeling that you're something like a little sister to me. I started to feel that way when I saw Karen and Tsukihi. I'm sorry for being such an awful big sister. I'm sorry for making you worry all this time. This really is my final request. This is the last time I'll force you to play such a difficult role. Please, I know she's a troublesome girl, a pyromaniacal runaway, but I'll wait for as long as it takes for her to come home. I love you both, and myself. Yours in haste.
And then, that was it for the letter my master wrote before going to sleep. It was hard to know what to say. I'd always thought my master was a smart animal, Neo'd an idiot like me. But Neo, it looked like she might have been just as stupid. Or maybe even stupider. I'd need to be stupid in order to make my master smart, if you went by the logic in her letter, but even that seemed fishy to me. Since the way I work as a character is that I only ever do as my master wants, in order to protect my master's intentions, she didn't have to write such a letter. All she had to do was go to sleep like normal, and I would have gone out there to beat that tiger down. I share my master's memories, so if she realized what the tyrannical tiger, really was, I would absolutely kneel about it too. Nio, my master was fully aware of that. She said so in the letter, so that meant she knew but still needed to ask me. In the end, my master and I ever realized that that's exactly what people call her fastidiousness. And Nyat being like everyone else. Niao, that is the biggest tragedy of all.
Meow!
I placed the Nyote book on top of the desk. Really, I had her memories of writing the letter too. That meant there was no real reason for me to read it, but I took the time to anyway. I guess I'm in Nio place to say anything about my master. Whatever the case, I now had a general idea of what was happening. The tyrannical tiger, and the source of my master's illness. I had all the details now. But even my master seemed to be mistaken about a few things, not that she could have avoided those mistakes and she was building a case without having everything she needed to come to a conclusion. Both the style and context of my master's letter were out of joint. There was no way she wrote it in a collected state of mind. It'd be impossible for her to get a perfect score in this situation. But she's still managed to get decent marks, an 80 out of 100, Nio bad.
How does she not see it? You'd think she would. You'd think she'd question why no yacht jealousy ever sprouted about Hitagi Senjogahara and Koyomi Araragi going out, even though she burned with envy about her home and family.
The strongest emotion in my master was romantic love. I don't think I need to explain. Just think back to the transformation before the culture festival. Basically, that annoying, little human's little sister was right when the first thing she associated with fire was feelings of love. So the very first thing my master should have burned wasn't the Hanekawa residence or the abandoned cram school, it was Hitagi Senjogahara, the person. Did my master really nyotice? No, I guess that meant she was looking away from the fact. Then I suppose my master would eventually run into that reason once she's able to stop looking away from the truth and look straight at it instead. I wonder if she'll be able to take it though. It's a cruel truth, and my master wouldn't be able to cut her heart loose anymore.
Loving me and the tyrannical tiger loving herself. I doubt my Meister knows just how hard that is. She's an extreme case, but doesn't any human look away from their stress and envy to one degree or any other?
Nio, many people are able to look at the world head on. Why did my master have to be the one to wear such heavy shackles? Me and the tyrannical tiger needed to carry that weight. Just because she cut her pain loose, that didn't mean her pain never hurt. In fact, just imagine how painful it is to sever a piece of your heart.
And her biggest mistake was calling someone like me her family nyahaha. I'm nothing more than her pet.
Mio, I was a stray, and it was weird to call me her sister to begin with. I was a male when I was run over on that street. But then again, I was made from a cut-off piece of my master's heart even if I'm based on an afflicting cat, so I guess my gender is a little fuzzy. Little sister? Little brother being called either doesn't feel wrong. Why ask what an aberration's gender is to begin with? Actually, the most impressive thing was that she could call that gigantic tiger her little sister. She, you, the females are fiercest when it comes to wild animals, right? Wanting me to attack it and exercise it was one thing, but asking me to bring the tiger back to her heart as family was a ridiculous request. Nayo dead or alive, but alive and well, she was asking for too much. I was planning on beating it down even if my master didn't ask me to. But then she went and asked for even Mayor. But if that Hawaiian-shirted jerk expert heard me, I'm sure he'd say, "What violent thoughts? Aberrations and humans need to figure out how to coexist or something." Isn't that the kind of thing that little human said? Sure, we were both new breeds of aberrations. Both aberrations born from my master. But, unlike me, that thing wasn't based on any aberration. Its spirit didn't possess anything. My Nayanabarashno master didn't seem to know what exactly that meant. She didn't know how freeing it was to a Nayabaration to Nayabarashan to Naya was. Be written about, to have Naya records, to Nayabar have been spoken of. Honestly, I didn't even want to imagine it. One thing I could say is that the tiger had Nayo blind spots, Neo weaknesses. Forget bringing it back. Just opposing it was difficult. I'd have to face it head on and destroy its strengths.
Naya would have a heavy burden right on my shoulders, too. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just an aberration that works for my master's sake. Whether my master's parents' home burns, or some memorable building burns, or a friend's home burns, or even this home burns, it doesn't matter to me at all. If anything, those rising flames look refreshing to me.
Because there wasn't much of a fundamental difference between the tyrannical tiger, the avatar of her envy, and me, the avatar of her stress. It called us similar aberrations too, so if anything, I understood the tyrannical tiger's feelings better. The only real difference between the two of us is whether we were independent of our master, or if we couldn't separate ourselves from her. It didn't seem to mean anything to me. Just like my master understood, I was just a Ni-aberration who was going to disappear sooner or later. So maybe there was neon need for her to take me back inside and burden herself with me. Maybe it was also true for the tyrannical tiger. If she did nothing, the flames of emotion might all just get expelled and vanish, so there might be no need for my master to take it all into herself. Nayo just no need. Doing so might even backfire. Me coming out had to be its own kind of burden for her, so instead of accepting me, she needed to erase me. She needed to extinguish me. It wouldn't be hard to do, in fact it'd be very easy to make me disappear. My master only had to wish for it to happen, but that wasn't what my master chose to do. She'd set us loose, but Nayoshi was trying to get us back. What a funny thing, me. The tyrannical tiger, we were just Nayo-senses to my master should be able to.
So it's pointless.
Hitachi Senjogara must have changed. That annoying little human must have changed too. And my master also changed. But no matter how much you change, there's something that doesn't change. The world. Hitachi Senjogahara changing doesn't mean her past Nai ever happened. That little human changing doesn't mean his past Nai ever happened. It doesn't change. It's not replaced. It doesn't become something else. Humans are themselves for as long as they live. We, who were created by my master, who wandered around town during spring break wanting to meet that vampire, didn't change anything. So, it really would be right and good for us to just disappear. That annoying little human and that Hawaiian-shirted jerk would agree. I was just in the way. And so was the tyrannical tiger.
But, well, she asked.
I didn't know what this feeling was. I knew I should be doing the same thing, whether she asked me to or not so. Why did I feel so inspired? The burden on my shoulders should have only weighed me down. So why did it feel so comforting? All that happened was that for the first time I had a place waiting for me. I had somewhere to go home to. That was it, but why did I now feel like I could accomplish anything? What had she done? It made me happy. It made me want to cry.
Like that I'm gonna cry, I'm a cat. I don't cry, I meow.
Meow. I meowed and unlocked the window. My maester figured out that I'd come out the night before because I'd forgotten to lock it. She probably would have figured it out anyway, there was a lot of other evidence. But I didn't think I needed to be careful about that now. I wouldn't be coming back to this room as me. It seemed like my master had chosen my current appearance because she thought these clothes would be easy to muse around in, but really, I mused around best wearing nothing. At all. I felt bad doing that to my maester, though. I even felt sorry now for going around in just her underwear during Golden Week. So I'd accept her act of kindness. She was going to have to let me go barefoot at least. And, just as the bottom of my paw hit the windowsill, I remembered something. Just a cat's passing fancy, really. No matter what ended up happening, my master wasn't going to be my master anymore, and I wasn't going to be me either. This wasn't about individual differences between Black Hanekawas, it really would be the last time I surfaced. After being put off in May and June, the aberration known as me really was going to be resolved this time. So I'd write something down for her too. Would these count as final words in my case? Probably Neo. I wasn't going to die or disappear. I was just going home. But what a long way back it was.
Nigh right time for my final service to my Meister.
It's Nyat Sanctins now. I added one little line to the end of my maester's letter before flying out of the wide-open window into the mule light.
I'll be off.
I am a tiger. I have a name. The tyrannical tiger. I have an idea of where I was born, but all I remember is that I saw sobbing and weeping in a dark, damp place. I am made of not envy alone, but of all dark emotions. I am a product of darkness, the kind of darkness that makes you want to avert your eyes. But it does not matter to me what I am, what my name is, where I was born, what I am made of. In fact, the name tyrannical tiger is almost a nuisance. They say that a dead tiger leaves its skin behind, while dead men leave their names behind. But I am made of nothing but darkness. I have been all but dead from the beginning, and I intend on leaving behind neither name nor skin. I do not intend on leaving a single cinder behind, like a raging fire that leaves not a single pillar or post behind. I will burn everything to nothing. All that I hold important is this heated, burning obligation in my frame. This tiger of tyranny cares not for the past. I must burn it. I must burn it. Burn what? Everything. The moment after I was born into this world, I saw my mother who had brought me into it. No, perhaps I should say my twin sister. It seems that the flames that burn in my chest come from this sister of mine, my strong, wise, frightening, fragile, pure white sister. Innocent and unblemished. White, transparently white. My beautiful sister, who looks not a thing like me. She truly was beautiful. That beauty, that whiteness. When I think of how it is I who protects it, I feel proud. But that matters none. The spark can be anything. The fire can grow in any way. The one and only thing I have is this obligation. While I have no sense that I am doing something for her sake, I also do not intend to cause her any harm. Just as the cat born in the same way from her said, I have no background, no motivation. One could say that I am nothing but a flame. I am a white flame. I have been given neither consciousness nor will. While I may appear to be speaking my thoughts, I am only feigning to, only pretending to. I am a natural phenomenon. I simply burn what needs to burn. No, there is nothing in this world that cannot burn. I must burn everything. Inside, I am jealous of everything. I am jealous of fathers, mothers, friends, juniors. They ought to disappear. They ought to vanish. They ought to suffer. They ought to lament. They ought to feel down. They ought to mourn. They ought to languish. They ought to feel worthless. They ought to cry. They ought to cry like me. Perhaps those tears will help abate the flames. Now, what should I burn this evening? Though all may go up in flames with time, there is still an order to be followed. There is still a process. So I suppose for now, this building will be next. As I thought this. No, before I thought it, I was already there. I have no will. I have no intentions. This is I. I am this. There is no getting there ahead or behind. I appear anywhere. My fires spread anywhere. I looked carefully at the target, inspecting it. I see. It seemed easier to burn than a house or a building. But whether it will be simple or difficult, it was all the same. Hesitation was meaningless once I acquired a target. Everything was the same. I do not know everything, but everything burns. I open my mouth wide, baring my fangs, and then the flames. The flames.
Bro!
Then, in that moment, standing between me and my target was a cat. A single silver kitten came flying from the sky as if it had grown wings and seemed to stand in my way. Just like I expected, the tyrannical tiger was now right in front of the Tamakura apartments, where Hitagi Senjogahara and her dad lived. Even if I was wrong, I was planning on just climbing up to the roof and searching the town like I did last time. But it's Nayo like I wasn't certain about it. I Nayu. After all, the tyrannical tiger and I used to be one and the same thing, born from the same place.
Hey there, Tiger! I'm here to get you! Come on, let's head back together!
But, once again, like I expected, the tyrannical tiger was not even going to answer me. She was just silently glaring at me. Now that I was facing her, it made me realize all over again just how huge tigers are. She was a monster. Real tigers weren't ever supposed to be that big. It almost felt like I couldn't tell how far away she was. I knew this wasn't a fairy tale like Pinocchio or anything, but it made me feel like the best way to defeat her might be getting swallowed and then fighting my way out of her guts. I could try that if I was going to defeat her, but that's what I was here for.
Move! You there! I will burn you! You are in the way! You are in the way! And me!
I didn't know exactly why, but I laughed. Maybe it was a chuckle. No, it was a snicker. It was weird. This tiger looked so huge and was so intimidating, which made everything she said feel so solemn, and even last time we met. That was y'all to scare me on the inside as we talked. But now I realized it was different. She wasn't solemn at all. She just lacked any sentiment. She didn't have the tools she needed to speak and communicate. Like a newborn baby. That's why we couldn't have a discussion. I guess it's obvious that she was a nyanthant since she was only born a few days earlier, but an original aberration, huh? An original one with no history. That's what had been cut loose from my master's heart. A new breed of aberration. Actually though, original aberrations made by individuals, aren't that uncommon. An old painter named Sekien Toriyama, who made his living by drawing yokai, apparently snuck in some of his own among all the other traditional ones. No matter what age they live in, every creative person must dream of making something of their own that can rival tradition. Of course, it must take an enormous amount of talent, energy, to create something that can rival a traditional yokai. So what was it in my master's case? Her stress and dark emotions, doubt. Though I guess it's a little ironic for the tyrannical tiger, Nioli born from that, to be lacking any sentiment. Or maybe maybe it wasn't that she lacked sentiment because she was Nioli born. Maybe my master unconsciously, but intentionally created the tyrannical tiger to be that kind of aberration. Purposely, because it was born from emotions, the tiger was shorn of emotion. It was lacking as a creature.
Burn! I will burn you! Move! It is all too late! I will burn all! And I will burn that house first!
You, Nio, that's not what our master wants!
Ha!
Neo. It was hard for me to believe she even understood what my words meant. I didn't think she was as stupid as me, but she was even less flexible than me.
I care not whether that woman does or does not want this. You are free to call that woman your master, but that woman is nothing to me. She is merely...
The spring from which my need to burn arises, the tyrannical tiger finished.
The spring from which your need to burn arises. That's a mixed metaphor.
Not that it made any sense to. Sure enough, it didn't seem to land at all. So I was right. She wasn't trying to be funny, but still.
You Nayo, she's Nayot, Nayoing to you. Tiger, she's our birth parent.
Our birth parent! How truly tedious.
You couldn't call this a conversation we were having.
And is it not that woman who knows better than anyone just how tedious a birth parent is?
Oh, you might be right.
Niao, that one hurt to hear. I guess it went to show just how monstrous our master was as a spring, if a Naya-born aberration could be so sharp.
Maybe that's why our Meister called us her
Little sisters.
I don't know how it works, but apparently they're real. Nia. Ah! So it might be a perfect tag for you since you're a real hot oddity sister.
I have no interest in tags or the like. I am a natural phenomenon that burns whatever I wish to burn. I am like an automaton.
Hard-headed through and through.
I am not interested in hot commodities.
Oh,
This conversation was really going nowhere, and I felt like I was trying pretty hard. In fact, I'd say I tried pretty hard the time before the culture festival, too. You might not believe me, but I do feel like I went too far during Golden Week. So if we could bring this to a peaceful end, that's what I wanted. But when I faced that annoying little human before the culture festival, I was dealing with a human, while we were two aberrations this time. Nio only that, we were created by the same master, and we still couldn't communicate. It was really getting me down. It seemed like I couldn't blame it all on the tyrannical tiger, though. Well, nothing I could do about that. Nio that it seemed like my master would be able to convince her. So I guess I was the right cat for the job. Someone had to bring this runaway girl back home, and it seemed like that was my task. Unlike me, the tyrannical tiger didn't share memories with my master or emotions either. While I said we were similar aberrations, she was still a different breed. And that's why. I had to use words to communicate with her. But
hey, Tiger.
What is it, cat? Ah!
I should go ahead and tell you that I personally don't intend to say one thing or any other about the stuff you've done until now. I'm not planning on criticizing you and saying it was a crime to burn down that home or that building. Arson being a crime is a human idea. After all,
if they went around cracking down on that kind of thing, they'd be persecuting most aberrations out there. And that included me during Golden Week. And anyway, while there might be a decent number of tiger aberrations, you can find even more fire aberrations out there. A countless number even. Seriously, there's so many you might start to think that you could just group them all together. You can't possibly crack down on all of them, just like how you can't crack down on every parking violation in the world.
I assumed as much. In that case.
but
I cut her off and glared at her.
I told you before, Neil, I'm not going to forgive you if you hurt my master.
What's a funny thing to say?
The tyrannical tiger had a puzzled look on her face. Nio as though my words weren't getting through, but as if she truly didn't understand them.
I do not care about that woman, and so I have no intention of harming her in any way. But you realize the feeling of wanting to burn down this apartment came from none other than your master herself.
Yeah, probably. That was the truth to this tiger. Neo, it was the absolute truth. My master envied the Senjagaharas' home, to the point of wanting it to burn. That was the truth. And it was also the truth that she envied those two organisms known as her parents that I'd sent to the hospital over Golden Week. And she was envious that the little human asked only the monkey girl for help. But still, Yunayo.
Her feelings of trying to hold back that ending were also true, Tiger, and you're ignoring that fact.
Enough. That woman's self-denial was what gave birth to me, was it not? So she is only reaping what she has sown. My flames do not take into account such circumstances.
They can only burn. They burn. As if to wash it all away, as if to sweep it into the sea. They can only reduce everything to nothingness, as if it never existed. They can only make it so that it never happened. Saying this, the tyrannical tiger took a step toward me. Meow. Surprisingly, she seemed to be the first one to get all hot and bothered. Then again, she was rooted in flames.
Well, between us two aberrations, you're in the...
There was Nio denying it. I was the one who wasn't acting like a Nio aberration. I mean, I used to be an afflicting cat, which is supposed to be more about getting payback than paying anyone back. If you thought about it, at first I was the one who'd been trying to harm our master. I just happened to have a change of heart, and Naya was risking life and limb for my master's sake. You never knew. It was almost like I was a human or something. Our master's friend lives in the apartment you're about to bum down, and at this hour I don't think it's going to happen to be empty like with your other 2 fires so far. They were probably sleeping in there. That woman might have talked about how she was concerned that her home or the Arajuses could catch on fire, but I knew that wouldn't keep her from going to sleep. I knew that from going through my master's memories. That's how much she trusted my master's memories. That's why I needed to fight. As Black Hanekawa, as Tsubasa Hanekawa, and at this is in 41 too.
I know our master will cry if that woman dies, and I need to do anything I can to keep that from happening.
Ha! That will not happen. I guarantee you. That woman does not cry. When she feels like crying, she sets loose the part of her heart that wants to cry. When she is bothered, she sets loose the part of her heart that is bothered. That is how she has lived for 18 years, giving birth to me and you. No. She'll only continue to...
She'll only continue to live that way, giving birth to countless monsters, keeping only herself pure and white, clean and pretty, never hating another, never resenting another, kind and loving to all. She will live a beautiful life. Ever the real deal, said the tiger.
No.
And then hold on, this was Naomi speaking, that's not who it was at all. It was me. Tsubasa Hanekawa denied it.
No. I decided to stop already. I want to become someone who hates others. I want to become someone who resents others. I want to be unable to be kind and loving to others the way I have been until now. I'm sure people will start to dislike me and detest me. I'll probably become short-tempered and unforgiving. I think I'll start getting frustrated and annoyed. I might become dumber. I might not be able to laugh anymore. I might start weeping and sobbing.
Yes, Aragi would be really disappointed. I'd no longer be able to overlook the way he messed around. I bet, but maybe that would still make him happy, because that's the kind of person he is. A kind person. I really did feel so jealous.
But that's fine. I'm fine with that.
I'd looked away from reality. I'd forced you two to do all of my dirty work. And I'm sick and tired of it. What I was doing to you, how was it any different from what had been done to me?
I don't want to be the real deal. I want to be real. I don't need to be beautiful. I don't need to be white. I want to get dirty, just like the 2 of you.
I couldn't be a girl who never knew what it meant to be stained for my entire life. I wanted to know filth. I wasn't saying I wanted to become black, but I wanted to take the black and the white together. I wanted to become an adult who was gray as ash. I was tired of living this life, where I couldn't cry, even with a broken heart.
Come back, won't you? It's past your curfew.
Let's have dinner together, I offered. Extending my hand to the tyrannical tiger, extending a hand to my past. Enough! Spat the tiger. It bared its fangs and leapt toward me. That same moment, I fell over and of course I was now back, but I was facing a bit of a problem. In short, the aberration that I'm based on, the afflicting cat, is one of the weakest yokai out there. More or less useless in a fight. I'm not a fighter. So it kind of begged the question, how was I supposed to face off against the tyrannical tiger, an aberration with a lot of freedom and nihil base at all? Yes, I know that's not how you're supposed to use the phrase beg the question, but does it really matter? I know, I'm misusing it, but you still know what I mean. Why do I need to go back and figure out any other way to say it? I'm in an eat or be eaten situation here. I might have been the earlier born aberration, but I wasn't even sure if you could call the tyrannical tiger my little sister. Aberrations can be aberrant. Okay, my master had described that little human and his sisters as triplets born apart, and I felt the same way about me, my master, and the tyrannical tiger, but the tyrannical tiger definitely didn't feel like the youngest of us 3. After all, stress is born from emotional friction. So if the tyrannical tiger was right and my master was the spring she drew from, then the spring that I drew from might turn out to be the tyrannical tiger. I might have been born first, but that didn't mean the tyrannical tiger couldn't be the first one to exist. So even a simple comparison could rank the tyrannical tiger as a better aberration than me, Black Hanekawa. To complicate things further, the tyrannical tiger was also my successor. They say that the later machines like computers are built, the better, right? And if you follow that same logic, there was no way I could beat the tyrannical tiger using normal methods. And then naturally, my master was more experienced in creating aberrations when she created the tiger. And that's why she was a tiger, just like the Nyota said. Anyone could see who'd win in a fight between a cat and a tiger. Anyone could see. It made you want to look away, but my master wasn't looking away. She was facing it head on, so I couldn't turn tail and run meow. After all, afflicting cats are cats with Nio tail.
Phew.
I dodged the tyrannical tiger's fangs by the skin of my own teeth and snuck under its gigantic body as if I was going straight into the beast's den. My strategy was to use her size against her. You know, there's a saying, the cornered rat can even bite a cat, so what's wrong with a cat biting a tiger? And also,
Mer. O.W. dubbed.
I had something, my secret weapon as an afflicting cat, my energy drain. It always worked no matter my opponent. Even against aberrations, so I could achieve my goal if I sucked the injury from the tyrannical tiger and brought that back to my master. My master's request. I could grant it then. Sure, it was a pretty rough way to bring a runaway girl back home, but we could talk it over once we were all there. There's no miracle cure for family problems. It's not like you can reconcile with your family at the drop of a hat like some kind of melodramatic garden variety domestic drama for 18 years. Our master had kept cutting loose and been cut loose. We couldn't go straight back to the way things were. Neo, there never was a place for us to go back to. We would have to build it from scratch. Today was just the first step towards that, and so, I was positioned under the tyrannical tiger's belly, and I embraced it, with my whole body. With my whole strength. I made sure to touch as much of my body as possible to the tyrannical tigers to maximize my energy drain's performance.
Men
Mere. Row. W.
With a tyrannical tiger groaned, I screeched at the top of my lungs. Nyat a scream to motivate myself, like I was saying I'd never let go. Nyat that while my energy drain, my special ability as a aberration, was the one opening I had to defeat the tyrannical tiger. Using it also meant you needed to think about what her special ability was as a aberration. A fire aberration. The tyrannical tiger, there are 3 ways that might work. The easiest pattern for modern-day people to understand is what you might call pyrokinesis, where all it needed to think was, burn for something to burn, making it closer to a psychic ability than a aberrational phenomenon. So it feels more like a human skill than a aberration's. Putting aside the question of if you believe in psychic powers, there really was nothing that I'd be able to do if the tyrannical tiger was actually using pyrokinesis to cause fires, because no matter if it was me or anyone else, you'd be turned to ash as soon as you entered her sight. For that reason, though, I never believed it to be that pattern. And in fact, even when we talked, no part of my body or even my clothes caught on fire. Plus, its first attack was an animalistic bite. I could count that one out by now. So, pattern number 2. Another one that's easy to understand, or maybe easy to imagine, where the tyrannical tiger breathes fire from its meoth, or shoots flames from its claws. That kind of pattern. And because this one works together with biting and scratching, it lined up with being a predator. Fire-breathing monsters show up all the time in any man and monster movies, right? So from that point of view, this was the most likely reason the tyrannical tiger could create fire. Well, it was the pattern I was hoping for, but I was wrong. It wasn't the first pattern, the worst one of all. But it was the third pattern.
Mr. O'Hot, hot.
I nearly took both my arms off of the tyrannical tiger's torso, but realized what I was doing and just barely held back on. To something that was meow ablaze, to the tyrannical tiger's torso.
So that's the pattern here. Your whole body is.
While there are some fire-breathing aberrations out there, this was the more common way it worked. My master is a stickler for the rules, so of course she was going to stick to precedent when making an aberration. She wasn't going to show off her originality, she was going to be orthodox. Her aberration was a strange and suspicious fire.
It's useless, cat. It is in a beast's nature to fear flames. To say nothing of grasping onto a flame, your actions deviate not only from those of an aberration, but also from any creatures.
She sounded calm. Of course she did, for the same reason that vampire girl Shanyobu Oshinyo cold sit in my arms and look lively, even though my energy drain worked on anything I touched, whether I wanted it to or not. In other words, while my energy drain may look invincible at first glance, it has a weakness. Or maybe I should say a structural flaw. A necessary structural flaw. If my target had a near-endless supply of energy, absorbing all of it would be like trying to dry a dam. And while I didn't think the tyrannical tiger's energy as the avatar of our maester's dark emotions could rival a vampire's, still, its energy was like thermal energy. Literal flames. It was clear as day that I'd be roasted alive before I could absorb it all up.
Ah, shut it. Of course I know that.
Which was exactly why. It was exactly because it was clear as day that I screamed. I yowled as a cat.
It doesn't matter how stupid I am. I at least know that a cat can't beat a tiger.
While a cornered rat might bite a cat, it was only a bite at the end of the day. It's Nio like the rat could win or fight off the cat. It would just make the cat mad and then get eaten, right? And Nio, it was the same for me. To be honest, I didn't even half believe that this energy drain was going to work, that it would be an opening. I knew this wasn't even a gamble. I was just acting like I didn't know.
In that case, why do this? It's senseless. It's reckless. It's pointless.
Because our Meister asked me to?
You probably wouldn't understand. You were just born. You probably wouldn't understand. You don't understand just how happy it makes me for our maester, who always wants to do every little thing all by herself, to rely on me. How happy it makes me for our maester, who always tries to do every little thing all by herself, to rely on me without any concern for embarrassment or honor, about how it looks or how it reflects on her, when I was just a plain cat who had been run over by a car. And she shamelessly relied on me. She called me her little sister. She called me her family. You know?
She asked me to take care of this, to take care of you!
And I thought as I looked at the Tamakura apartments, Hitagi-sen Jogahara asked me the same thing too. She asked me to take care of my master Cash.
Ooh.
I held even tighter to the tyrannical tiger's torso, so hot that I had no idea what temperature it could even be, and buried my head in it like I was rubbing my cheek against her. My clothes had gone up in flames long ago. Hot, 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 hot. It felt like I was embracing the sun. And in fact, maybe that's what I was doing. I could see the flames of my master's pooled and accumulated envy gathering into a mass of that scale, which was why I needed to swallow it all. The hotter it was, the bigger it was. The more I couldn't let go of it, the more I needed to hold on to it. That's how I felt.
Mirror?
Shut up!
The tyrannical tiger shook its body like it was wet and trying to dry off. And that's all it took to send me flying. My body smashed into a nearby concrete wall.
Meow.
Hearing my own scream, I nearly fell unconscious for a moment from the sudden change in temperature. Nio, I couldn't pass out Nio. I was practically covered in flames. If I lost consciousness in this state and switched back to my master's, she would probably die on the spot from full body burns. I could somehow withstand this temperature, only because I was an aberration. Still, what amazing power. I was nothing in comparison. You know there's an aberration that's good at sumo wrestling known as the Bake no High, the changed flame. Sounds ridiculous, Nio. But she was just as monstrously powerful as one of those. Doggone it though, I know that's a weird thing for a cat to say. While I barely managed to stay conscious, one attack was all it took to immobilize me. I couldn't move a finger. Really, I prepared myself, came here ready to attack, and look what happened. Talk about lame. My thinkers outsighted ab media laters. Then again, that annoying little human was always risking his life like this. He must have done a lot of fighting by now, with tears in his eyes, crying foul, and crying. Yuge and Zio what? I wish my master would have cried too. If she was sad, if she was lonely, if she was bitter, who? Naya's. Maybe she wouldn't have had to give birth to me or the tyrannical tiger. And things could have still gone well? Neo, maybe it was the other way around. Could my master not cry because we existed? Well, yeah, that made sense. If you had little sisters like us, you couldn't cry. Nayada as their older sister.
What a weak being! So it's over already!
Expressionlessly, emotionlessly, as it sizzled and sidled its way toward me.
Your gratitude, or whatever you call it, that is all it was worth. Very well. Then, as an act of kindness from one born from within that woman to another, I will personally drag you down to hell.
The mass of fire was calmly muttering some really scary stuff. Hell. I wondered how much better that would be than a nightmare. Still, how many times would it be? I didn't want to die again. I'd been run over by a car and killed. I'd been won over by my master and killed. And now it was over with this tiger too. How many times was I going to die? They say that death is the only cure for stupidity. But that's a lie. I'll always stay stupid, I bet.
Oh, it really did make me happy, though.
Maybe it was what you'd call my nature as a creature. But looking toward the tyrannical tiger as it carefully approached me, cautious of my energy drain, I muttered. Were they my dying words, Neo? It was just me being a sore loser.
A life or death fight with you, and all I managed was to delay this arson by 10 seconds. I can't stand how weak I am.
I told you so!
There really was no sentiment there at all. Churning emotion devoid of sentiment.
It's senseless. It's reckless. It's pointless.
It was scienceless. It was miraculous. It was pointless.
Ah. I never got a chance to say it in the end, even though I loved him so much. Loved him so much I became a monster. I was never able to tell Aragi that I loved him.
It was senseless. It was reckless. It was pointless.
That's not true, Hanekawa. And then, that moment, a lengthy sword came swooping down from the night sky. It pierced straight through the tyrannical tiger's neck to stitch it to the ground. That great katana Inuit, I knew what it was, its name, the enchanted blade Kokoro Watari. The aberration slayer, unparalleled in all history. It might have been senseless, it might have been reckless, but it wasn't pointless. If you hadn't risked your life and delayed this tiger from burning this place down by 10 seconds, I wouldn't have made it in time. His dark hair had grown so much longer since spring break. His body was small and fit, he was already in tatters, from his skin to his clothes, and he was missing a shoe. How terrible the torment and trials he must have endured to be standing here now. His appearance was enough to tell the tale. And that would have made me cry. Then, with the hilt still in his hands, Araragi smiled. Araragi, 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 Araragi. I felt a burning pain all along my skin. The burns covering my body hurt now that my consciousness had thrust its way back to the surface, but it didn't bother me one bit. I burned far hotter in my chest. Oh, so Tsukihi was right after all. Envy was nothing compared to the flames of love. Just look at how the mere sight of Araragi made this fire roar, and it had only been a few days. It felt like we were meeting for the first time, in a century.
Araragi, why are you here?
Hey, what sort of stupid question is that, Hanekawa? That hurts. You're in trouble. How could I not come running to your side? Seriously, listen to you. You were off on some grand adventure with Mioi and Miss Kanbaru until just now. Look at how battered you've gotten yourself again. Hurt all over. Covered in wounds, no doubt having done many senseless things. No doubt having done many reckless things. But you didn't do a thing that was pointless, did you? Well, actually, I tossed everything aside and came running when I saw you in casual clothes in the pic you sent me.
Hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on.
I really wanted that to be a joke, and those clothes were his too. Plus, most of it had gone up in flames. And there, under Aragi growled the tiger. The tyrannical tiger growled.
It hurts! It hurts! It burns! 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 It burns!
Oops. Aragi saw this and pulled the blade from its throat in a single motion. He seemed used to it. How much hell had he been through over these few short days? Was his warrior level higher, or was I just imagining it? Black Hanekawa, I guess? At the moment. Wait, you'd be Hanekawa either way. But you still have those ears and stuff, and your hair is white.
It's all me.
I see. Nodding, he took the tyrannical tiger, on the verge of death, grabbed that mass of my emotions, still stubbornly smoldering, by the neck and dragged it in front of me. He took that heavy, massive beast that seemed to weigh easily more than 1,000 pounds, and brought it to me.
You're not exercising it, are you?
Sorry, but I went and read that whole letter, he said. So he'd gone back to his room before running over here. No, that's exactly why he knew where here was. I pierced its vitals with Kokoro Watari, so it's not going to last long. If you want to absorb it, you'd better do it fast. If he read that, then he understood everything, including the fact that I would be gone, or at least that I would no longer be the same me. He knew that as he was saying this.
Are you okay with that, Aragi?
Even so, even though I knew he did, I asked him in words if he knew. I clung on to his kindness. Save me, I who refused to speak those words until the very end.
Are you okay with me not being me anymore?
Like I said, what kind of a stupid question is that, Hanekawa? You just said it yourself. No matter what happens, it's all you. You might change, but you're still you. Don't worry, I'm not going to make any special exception for you. If you become a bad person, I'll hate you. If you do bad things, I'll get angry at you. If people resent you, I'll stick up for you. If you get stupid, well, I'll even help you study. If you cry, I'll comfort you. Saying so, he patted my head. This one act caused my heart to be engulfed in flames. I couldn't even describe it as hot anymore. Right? I always wanted someone to do that to me. I wanted someone to stroke me gently like that. I wanted someone to touch me gently.
Hey. Araragi. I love you, Araragi. Can we date with the intent to get married?
I was finally able to say it. Just that much, and it took me nearly half a year. Araragi looked the tiniest bit startled by my sudden confession before his expression turned into a troubled smile. I see. I'm super glad to hear it. But, I'm sorry, I happen to have a girlfriend.
Yeah, I know.
I raised my head and looked straight ahead of me. Room 201, Tamikura Apartments. She would be in there sleeping, alongside her dad.
Do you love her more than you love me?
Yeah. It was a mean question, but he gave an honest answer. I was so happy that he did. But of course, more than that, it hurt.
I've been rejected.
Right. This was it, correct. Confess, then get rejected. I felt so sad. I'd been talking about traveling the world and discovering myself when I'd never experienced this sorrow. What self-discovery, what self-creation? Without heartbreak, how could I go on a trip to mend my broken heart? I was never able to say, save me. But I did say, I love you. I was able to say it. Aragi noticed my feelings a long time ago, of course. He found out before the culture festival. Actually, he found out all over again if he read the note in his room. But it wasn't enough that he knew it. I needed to let him know. I needed a reply from him. He needed to let me know how he felt about me. I finally got my reply, and I was rejected, and was able to feel hurt. I reached out my hand and touched the tyrannical tiger's forehead. I patted the head of this third me. I was doing to the still burning flames of my emotions what I was so happy to have done to me. I stroked my smoldering feelings, an energy drain, for the last time. The burns across my body began to heal, and as they did, waves of feeling began to surge into me. Dark emotions that had pooled and accumulated for 18 years, and stress, everything I had forced onto Black Hanekawa, onto the tyrannical tiger, was now with interesting tours of jeopardy and access.
Anen.
Why was it? By the time I realized. By the time I realized, I was crying. Maybe I couldn't bear the overflowing emotions. Maybe it was the pain of the stress they brought with them. Or maybe, after all, it was my sadly broken heart, but right in front of Araragi, without a care if anyone saw me. Like a child, like a newborn child, I wailed. Which is why I feel this was the day I could be born at last. Just as he'd promised, Araragi comforted me until the tears stopped. Not saying a word, he spent the night gently stroking my head. The epilogue. Or, maybe, let's consider everything until now the prologue. My tale begins today. First is the question of what Araragi was up to these few days. Skipping school, but he stubbornly kept his mouth shut and refused to tell me a thing. While Miss Kanbara was present the next day like normal. And aside from the bandage on her left arm, she didn't seem to be covered with injuries like Araragi. He also said I didn't need to worry about my yoi, and that the temporarily severed pairing between him and Shinobu was now back, so it all worked out well in the end. Or at least that's the way it seemed. I still had no idea how Miss Gain and Lil Episode were involved, or how they had interacted, but this is Araragi we're talking about. I'm sure something incredibly painful happened, and that he overcame it. I want to be that way too. I also had a chance to speak to Shinobu, her pairing with Araragi now restored. Hearing of my experiences during his absence, she said,
What you've there is Akasha. While it may have no base, it was surely modeled on it or something of its ilk. I'd say 'twas an aberration created with something of that nature in mind, rather than a bake no high.
Akasha? What might you mean?
Really, class president? Thou art ignorant of the Kasha?
Oh, I'm certainly aware of what it is, but as I'm sure you're aware, it was a tiger.
And I'd heard as much from the afflicting cat, which is why I had trouble coming up with this then. Yet if this aberration was one of fire, then it surely must have been Akasha.
The Kasha, or the burning chariot, is an aberration said to drag dead bodies into hell, which, now that I thought about it, was something the tyrannical tiger had said too, and it was described in many cases as a cat aberration. A cat, dash that woman has seen me. Dash that alone is essential. More things she had said. In other words, seeing the tyrannical tiger was directly linked to a trip to hell, no ifs, ands, or buts.
It wasn't a cat, though. It was a tiger.
Similar enough, are they not?
And it wasn't a chariot, but a tiger.
Then what about a jaguar? Is that not a type of chariot nowadays?
A jaguar? So she was trying to say that a flaming chariot was just as likely to be a flaming tiger. That seemed like a coincidence, but then the name came from Miss Gain. No, it came from me, after all, in that case.
After thy afflicting cat, that aberration drawn across the street by a vehicle, we have a flaming chariot that draws the dead to hell. What an elegant connection, eh? Ha ha! And 'tis just as that Hawaiian-shirted boy says, meet an aberration and you'll be drawn by aberrations.
This feels like it's just turning into a word association game. So, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that while there may not have been a base aberration like with the afflicting cat, the tyrannical tiger still wasn't entirely original?
Not a thing exists that could be called entirely original. 'Tis the wall that any creator throughout history has inevitably encountered. Even Sekatizen, in fact, the flaming tiger ye conjured is undoubtedly the product of all thy gathered knowledge and relationships, not some changed flame or flaming chariot alone. One may have a great deal of freedom, but one is never truly free.
So it's like the saying, all art begins with imitation.
Oh, but what a terribly timid and masochistic way of thinking. We ought to think of ourselves as continuing on in the tradition of our great forebears, should we not? Every one of us continues in the footsteps of another, and every one of us will have others continuing on from the paths we've tread. We take the ball we've received from our predecessors and pass it on to the next generation. Someday someone may shoot that ball and score, but the match will only go on. 'Tis what we mean by lineage, and what we mean by tradition, and perhaps someone may follow after the Black Hanekawa or tyrannical tiger ye thought of.
I wouldn't want that happening. But maybe there was still meaning in my folly if it could go on to become a lesson for later generations. Even this worthless tale of mine. Maybe it could be of use, I thought. Well, now that Araragi had returned, I, of course, needed to leave the Araragi residence, like dough being pushed through a pasta maker, but he said, "No, don't worry about it. I'll sleep on the floor so you can keep using my bed. In fact, I'll sleep under the bed. I'll even be your bed. I promise to close my eyes when you change and stuff, of course." His kind objection, though, only served to make me feel like my chastity was in danger, so I respectfully declined. I was happy that he still treated me the same as always, but it also seemed to be his way of showing how unshaken his feelings were, and I couldn't help but feel pained, too. If I let Aragi keep me there any longer, maybe it was his chastity that was going to be endangered. Karen did say that he should just leave so you can become one of the Monogatari series by Nisio Izan, cast by Artale Studio. If you are interested in creating your own audiobooks, please check out our website, artale.ai. Now, enjoy the story.
Kids in our family, Tsubasa? How mean. But of course that wasn't happening. Their family consisted of them and them alone. I couldn't thrust myself into it. While it may have only been 2 days in retrospect, before leaving their home, I politely thanked everyone in the Araragi family who had taken care of me. From there, I ended up going back to Miss Senjokahara's place, the nearly incinerated room. 201 Tamakura Apartments. Apparently, Mr. Senjogahara was going on a 2-week-long overseas business trip, and he, in fact, requested me to stay with his daughter. I knew it had to be an excuse. There wasn't any way that he could so suddenly be assigned such a trip, not unless he asked for it. She must have explained the situation to him, and this was his way of handling the situation. She must have known that I couldn't stay at Araragi's for long. regardless of when he would return. In other words, that too was part of her scheme.
Hitagi, I've always told you that you should become the kind of person who helps her friends when they're in trouble, and that's exactly who you've become. I've never been happier.
He patted his daughter on the head, and I'll never forget Miss Senjogahara's expression as he did so, or his own. While I cohabited with Miss Senjogahara for a while after that, it's not as if everything went perfectly. Having taken the afflicting cat and tyrannical tiger in, I was, to be blunt, an emotional wreck. To say the least, I don't think I was pleasant to live with. Miss Senjogahara, though, still did what she could to support me.
I know how it is.
She let me know in detail how she'd overcome her churning emotions. We clashed, and we even fought, but we made up afterwards. And as the days went on, I began to understand why. Despite all the jealousy I should have felt for Aragi's girlfriend, she was the one person I never envied. Right. I think I understood from the beginning. Aragi, Miss Senjogahara, they were going to end up going out. I understood and knew that. I might not know everything, actually, but I did know that. So the supportive feelings I had for their relationship ever since Mother's Day, those, at least weren't a lie.
You know, Miss Hanekawa, I was thinking the complete opposite. Ever since seeing you and Araragi in April, I thought you two had to be going out, or that you were at least in love with each other. That's why I was shocked when I asked Araragi if you were, and he said no.
And now that I feel like I can be honest with you, she said before continuing.
I thought Araragi was going to reject me when I confessed how I felt. At the time, I was of course prepared to do anything to get him to say yes, but I can't deny that somewhere in my heart, some part of me felt resigned. I mean, Araragi was so clearly in love with you, and that's when I felt like I'd fallen in love with you.
Oh, that really is the opposite of me then. I doubt I'd have fallen for him so hard if it wasn't for the fact that he was going out with you. Yes, I know it's the most cliché thing to say, but we fell in love with his kindness. He never cuts anything loose, he never throws anything away. We fell in love with how many loved he is. Could so my sense that I had never begrudged Miss Senjogahara over Aragari was the one thing that I hadn't cut off. It was my one true feeling. I still couldn't deny thinking about how great it must have been, though, so I did tease her at night, and her reactions were so wonderful. Oh, so I did love Araraji, but I loved Miss Senjogahara too. And only when I was able to admit that to myself did I feel like my heart was well and truly broken. Pain and heartbreak, I'd managed to experience them, having lived thus for about 10 days. The moment arrived at last. The news reached me that a rental had been found to replace the burned-down Hanekawa residence, which meant I needed to go.
You don't need to leave so suddenly. Why don't you take your time until you feel like you're ready?
But I was fine now. She didn't need to worry at all. Thank you. I'll come over to play again soon. As I made my dashing exit from the Tamakura apartments, no, that's a lie. What really happened is that I broke down crying. It hurt to have to leave Miss Senjogahara, and I felt helpless when I thought of my life to come. So the tyrannical tiger was right. I really was fragile. Quick to break down and cry. But Miss Senjogahara cried too, so maybe we were even. And you know I ran into Sengoku on my way from the apartment to the rental house. Nadeko Sengoku, a middle school student with ties to Aragi. We had never interacted much with each other, though, and she was with her parents, so I didn't call out to her. She probably didn't notice me. They seemed to be such a close family. The thought passed. No, I thought as I suppressed the feeling. Nope, I shouldn't be suppressing it. I'm the kind of person who sees that kind of thing and feels jealous. My first step was going to be accepting that. As I went on living, I checked to make sure that a fire still burned in my heart after all. Flames are a part of civilization no matter what the flames may be. I knew I could evolve. I wasn't Miss Conborough, but my view had widened to the point where I could at least walk by a happy family like that and see them. So it felt like I was beginning, indeed. If you were wondering, the cases of the Hanekawa residence and the abandoned cram school burning down were chalked up to spontaneous combustion, as close to an accident as you could get window glass acting as a lens or something. Unusually dry air for summer or something. So the world did work itself out. contradictions did get resolved. Even so, I don't think I can allow myself to forget what I did. While no one ever tried to find me guilty, I was not innocent. That was something that needed to be fresh in the mind of every living thing. Pure white innocence was impossible. The rental house I arrived at wasn't too big. They must have seen it as a temporary abode for the duration of the new home's construction. In fact, it seemed like it was on the smaller side for the neighborhood. It didn't have many rooms either, but I had already faced the persons who should be called my father and my mother, and told them in no uncertain terms. I told them when I heard that they decided on a rental. Dad, Mom, please give me a room. And so, for the first time in my life, I had my own room. I didn't want the sisters in my heart to feel cramped. Yes, it's not as if she disappeared. It wasn't as if the tyrannical tiger disappeared. Either they were in my heart and I hadn't disappeared either. The old me was in me too. A thought crossed my mind. A model student, a class president among class presidents, kind to all, fair, smart, like some kind of saint. Maybe the old me whom Maradi described in such terms was the first aberration I ever created. The girl that Aragi called the real deal, and the girl that Miss Senjogahara called a monster. That was the very first time I created myself, the ideal me for whom I had killed myself in so many ways. It was probably something that I shouldn't have done. The very first thing that I had cut loose from my heart was myself. It was never about real or main, about dominant or controlling. It was all me. And so both the current me and the past me, the future me too. Maybe there was no essential difference among us. Just as Araragi would always continue to be Araragi, no matter how much he changed, I would never change, no matter what me I became. That's how it was. Nothing changed. That was not the epilogue, but the punchline of this story. I am me, Tsubasa Hanekawa. My cat ears were gone now, and I wasn't seeing tyrannical tigers, but about half of my hair was still white, almost like a tiger's stripes. That seemed like proof. I dye it black every morning now, since going to school looking that way would be a little too avant-garde. But it never feels like a bother or a waste of time. It's my way of communicating. With them, with my own heart and mind. It's the honest truth that I find it fun. Yes, I have a feeling this is how my life is going to be. Changing even when nothing changes. I used the key I had been given to open the front door. It looked like those two hadn't come back from work yet, and no one was home. It was a completely unknown house to me, but for some reason, it didn't feel like I was sneaking into a stranger's residence. If anything, it felt familiar. Was unlocking a front door enough to make you feel that way? Wondering, I began by climbing the stairs, one step at a time, like I was chewing over the act. When I climbed up the last stair and reached the second floor, for some reason I suddenly thought of Mayoi, the girl who'd been lost for a long time when I first met her. The lost cow, right? So just maybe the very first source I had cited in creating the tyrannical tiger hadn't been any flaming chariot or changing flame, but the lost cow. Mayoi had, of course, been parted from the lost cow by now, but I could see it as being something of an echo. Perhaps learning of Aralagi's absence wasn't the only reason I had met the tyrannical tiger just after coming across Mayoi. There was apparently a time when cows and tigers were confused for one another, so it didn't seem impossible. I had lost sight of family and home, so it seemed like an appropriate aberration to meet. Ever since that day, no, ever since I met Mayoi in the park that day in May, I had been lost, wandering back and forth, here and there, around and around. I must have been roaming. I thought to myself, I'd talk to Mayoi about it the next time I really had gotten myself lost, hadn't I? As lost as one could be. But thanks to that, I got to meet a lot of people. So, I witnessed various families. I witnessed various me's, which is why I could become me. If the past me is me, then the future me is me too. There's no moment when I'm not me. Then what me will I be tomorrow? Looking forward to things, I place my hand on the doorknob. It's my room, given to me. Western style, 100 or so square feet. Though only for the 6 short months until graduation, this place is, without a doubt for me, a place for us. Out of nowhere, I remember the passage added to the letter that I left in my notebook that day. No, it isn't long enough to be called a passage, a line, or just words. Just a brief little greeting from a white cat that always stayed with me, that protected me at all times. A common expression. One that passes through everyone's lips as a normal part of the day. But it's the first time in my life that I ever mouthed them. I'm home. I enter my room. Finally, I've made it back.
There are a lot of cases in manga where the protagonist gets so overwhelmed by, say, summer homework and pleads for something ridiculous, like if only I had two bodies, or I want there to be another me. Most such stories, however, seem to settle on the punchline that both of you slack off when you have two bodies or another self and don't get any more work done. That sounds plausible, but when I really think about it, I don't know. The issue there is that both bodies have free will. And if a single will could control plural bodies instead, wouldn't there be a dramatic improvement in efficiency? In other words, a single chain of command operating both body A and body B like a left hand and a right. You might think I'm being ridiculous here, but in fact I'm not. Given the incredible advancements in wireless communication in our world, I guess I just can't deny the feeling that some extremely mechanical solution might serve. A manipulator, to put it simply. But then, if we expand ourselves limitlessly like that, we might no longer be able to tell where we end. Should we consider the shoes we wear when we go outside a part of ourselves? Are nails part of us before we clip them, but not after we do? Couldn't we just say the books lining our shelves are us? Is what we know part of us? Or is it mere knowledge? The question of what the self is and how far it extends has been exercising many humans for ages, and when you think about it, maybe no times can do so like present-day society. Despite the title, Nekomonogatari, white, isn't meant to form a pair with Nekomonogatari, black, not in particular. Whether it's black or white, each tale can stand on its own, and they have different narrators in the first place, don't they? Say, I guess if Black Hanekawa, Kizumonogatari, Nizumonogatari, and Nekomonogatari, black, were the first season, then this Nekomonogatari white would be beginning a second season. I'm exaggerating on purpose, but I feel like up to the previous volume, the narrative already existed when I began the series, while the tale from this book on was a future unknown even to the author. I wonder if this is what they call characters acting on their own, but in any case, the plan is to release another 5 books or so. What will their story be? Okay, this has been a novel I wrote cat percent to entertain myself, Nekomonogatari, black. Pardon me, Nekomonogatari, white. We've requested VO Fan to keep drawing the front covers and insert images for the second season. Miss Hanekawa is getting too many covers though. 3 in this series? What if she's on the next one, too? I can see it happening. Well, please look forward to the coming installment, including who's going to be on its cover. Actually, I'd be surprised if it was anybody other than Hachikuji. I hope you'll continue to join me, everyone. Izio-san.